Hello there, and welcome to Hypersleep Voyager. Tonight, we turn our attention to one of the most exquisite and overlooked architectural wonders of the natural world, the kingdom of snowflakes and crystals. It is a silent, vast domain of intricate beauty existing not only in the winter sky, but also often beneath our feet, a hidden geometry that surrounds us every moment. We are going to let our minds drift into this crystalline world tonight, exploring the sacred geometry, the infinite variance, and the perfect six-sided symmetry that emerges from the most basic elements. This is a journey into the patterns of nature, a soothing path to deep, restorative rest. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps others find their way here too. Now take a deep, slow breath in and let it go with a gentle sigh. Feel your body begin its nightly surrender. Allow your shoulders to drop, releasing any tension they may be holding. Consciously unclench your jaw, softening the muscles around your mouth and temples. Let the weight of the day leave you. As your breathing settles into a steady, rhythmic pattern, allow your eyelids to grow heavy, softly closing against the light, sinking you down into comfort and stillness. Allow the sounds of the words to simply carry you away. Let's begin. Every single snowflake is a six-sided, unique crystalline structure. The moment of its creation is a silent, patient miracle high in the vast upper reaches of the atmosphere, where water vapor meets dust, and the temperature is precisely aligned for crystallization. It is a slow, methodical construction, adding infinitesimal facets one by one, guided by the eternal laws of physics. Imagine you are floating in that cold, invisible cloud, surrounded by the nascent crystals, each one beginning to spin gently, catching the faint, bioluminescent blue light filtering down from the moon. The only sound is the quiet hiss of condensation, and the temperature is a deep, encompassing chill that is entirely safe, entirely protective. This microscopic growth unfolds over time that feels immense, like an ancient geological process occurring in a fleeting moment. This reminds us that the greatest beauty often arises from the most patient, repetitive, and rhythmic processes. The geometry of ice is always hexagonal, a principle of perfect six-fold symmetry. This ancient geometric rule is written into the very heart of the water molecule, dictating that no matter the external conditions, be they turbulent or calm, the underlying structure will always revert to that stable, calming hexagon. We drift now, following the lines of that crystal structure down into the subterranean depths of a quartz cavern, where light refracts through massive, clear crystals. Picture the walls coated in this solid, permanent stillness, radiating a soft, pale glow against the deep black of the cavern. It is a place of profound, silent certainty, where time itself seems to slow, held steady by the rigidity of the silica structure. It is a reminder that even when the world around us shifts and changes, there is an eternal, unchangeable order existing at the deepest level of reality, offering a secure embrace. As crystals grow through the process of vapor deposition, bypassing the liquid phase entirely. This moment of pure transformation is incredibly quiet, occurring often in vast, open spaces where moisture hangs still and undisturbed. It is the signature of profound cold, a condition where chaos is minimized and form is maximized. Imagine standing on a frozen landscape at night, the air so still that you can hear the faint crackle of ice settling. Look closely at the frost feathering across the window pane. Each minute needle is a testament to this invisible, swift, and perfectly controlled growth. The air itself feels patient and thick, like a deep velvet blanket pulled up to your chin. There is a safety in this cold, a certainty that everything is ordered, everything is held. It is a humbling reminder that true transformation often happens in the most silent and still moments, requiring only perfect conditions under deep, rhythmic patience. Quartz crystals hold the memory of immense, special and ancient geological time within their structure. These are not creations of a fleeting winter's moment, but of millions of years spent deep within the Earth's crust. a subterranean pressure chamber. They are the eternal record keepers, solidifying under conditions we can barely comprehend, growing slowly, facet by patient facet in the deep black of the earth. Picture a geode, freshly opened, revealing a cavern clustered with amethyst, the colors radiating a faint, internal, bioluminescent purple that seems to absorb the silence. The weight of these stones is a profound comfort, a tangible representation of unhurried existence. We drift with this geological rhythm, letting the depth of time itself lull us toward rest. This reminds us that our own burdens and stresses are fleeting when measured against the massive, vast scale of the Earth's quiet, invisible history. The formation of a dendritic snowflake requires delicate temperature and humidity balances. Dendrites are the classic stellar forms with intricate branches, the six-pointed stars we patiently seek out. If the humidity is too high or the temperature shifts by a single degree, the crystal will form instead as a simple, less elaborate plate or column. This delicate, quiet equilibrium is the reason for their legendary perfection and vast uniqueness. Imagine looking through a silent, macro lens at the very tip of a growing branch, watching the invisible water molecules snap into position, one after the other, forming the rhythmic pattern. The whole process is bathed in a cool, calming bioluminescent glow, a pure white light that settles the mind. There is no hurry here, only the steady, eternal dance of creation guided by precise constraints. It is a reminder that true inner peace comes from accepting and embracing the delicate balance within our own lives. The mineral halite, or rock salt, forms perfect cubic crystals, mirroring the geometry of pyrite but composed of sodium and chlorine. Halite crystals grow by the slow evaporation of ancient seawater, a vast, patient process of supersaturation and deposition. Imagine looking into a dry, subterranean salt mine, where the walls are lined with clear to faintly pink cubes, reflecting the bioluminescent beam of your light into 1,000 miniature squares. This environment is utterly silent, a permanent record of an ancient ocean that retreated millions of years ago, leaving its fundamental chemical structure behind. We drift into the clarity of these cubes, sensing the deep, rhythmic safety of their right angles and planar faces. The weight of the earth above holds this structure in a constant, secure embrace. It is a reminder that simplicity and purity of form are eternal and can arise from the most basic, invisible solutions. The recrystallization of snow occurs when temperature changes cause water molecules to move from points of high surface energy to those of low energy, smoothing out sharp edges. This transformation is a silent, constant process, turning newly fallen dendritic snow into more granular, rounded grains over time. Picture a blanket of snow on a still, cold night. Though everything appears static, there is an invisible, molecular rearrangement taking place, driven by the patient laws of thermodynamics. This rounding gives the snowpack its strength and density, preparing it for its vast, long winter sleep. The sounds are hushed, muffled by the crystalline matrix, creating an atmosphere of deep, quiet rest. We drift with this subtle, ongoing shift, allowing the rhythm of molecular settling to soothe and ground us. This reminds us that even after a burst of creation, there is an eternal phase of settling and refinement that leads to greater stability and profound safety. Diatoms, microscopic, single-cell algae create shells or frustules made of biogenic silica that form intricate crystalline lattices. These are nature's smallest, most complex silica crystals, building vast, elaborate structures in the quiet darkness of the ocean floor. Imagine peering through a microscope into this ancient, a quiet world where the tiny, glass-like shells are suspended, catching the faint bioluminescent glow of the deep. Their rhythmic, repeating patterns are a testament to the eternal impulse toward geometry, even at the smallest scale of life. The silica itself is drawn from the water, patiently assembled atom by atom, creating a structure that is both delicate and incredibly strong. We drift now, following the slow, invisible current that carries these miniature jewels to their final resting place. It is a humbling reminder that complex, perfect structures are constantly being created, unseen, in the deep black beneath the surface of the world. The birefringence, or double refraction, seen in many crystals like calcite, is due to the way light slows down and splits into rays within the material. This ancient, optical property is written directly into the crystal's subterranean atomic arrangement. Picture a piece of clear calcite placed over a line of text, causing the words to appear doubled, a mesmerizing visual split. The invisible structure of the crystal dictates this rhythmic dance of light, an eternal physical law manifesting in a simple mineral. The experience is utterly silent, a perfect demonstration of geometry controlling energy. The light, slowly separated, moves with a patient, deliberate pace through the vast solid matrix. We drift our attention to the space between the light rays, that quiet zone of separation, finding a restful stillness there. This reminds us that there is a safety in observing the clear, unwavering laws that govern the physical world around us. The habit of a crystal refers to its typical external shape, which is often modified by the environment during its patient growth. A crystal might naturally form a prism, but if grown in a solution with impurities, it might develop a flatter plate instead. This interplay between ancient, eternal internal structure and the vast, external conditions creates the observed diversity. Imagine a quartz crystal growing in a pocket of warm, flowing fluid, its sides pushing out slowly against the resistance, seeking its perfect hexagonal rhythm. The surrounding rock is a silent, subterranean chamber that holds the solution in a secure embrace. The crystal waits, sometimes for millennia, in the deep black of the earth, for the invisible chemical balance to shift. We drift into the certainty of its inner geometry, unaffected by the fleeting conditions around it. This reminds us that while we are shaped by our environment, our core, inner structure remains patient, strong, and perfectly whole. The phenomenon of ice flowers or frost flowers occurs when water vapor sublimates directly into ice crystals on cold surfaces. This is a fragile, fleeting display of geometry, often forming elaborate ribbons or feathers on still, sub-zero mornings. Imagine waking to find the glass pane covered in these feathery blooms, each delicate structure catching the faint, bioluminescent light of the moon, making the whole world feel vast and deeply quiet. The crystallization process is entirely silent and extremely patient, the moisture drawn slowly from the air into its new, solid state. We drift our gaze along the intricate curves of these ephemeral blooms, seeing the six-sided structure repeating in the smallest detail. This ancient transformation is a reminder that beauty can emerge swiftly and unexpectedly when the conditions align for pure, crystalline order, offering a gentle embrace of tranquility. The mineral tourmaline often grows as elongated prisms with a characteristic three-sided cross-section, a distinct rhythm of trigonal symmetry. These crystals embody geological time, forming in hot, magma-rich environments deep within the subterranean crust. Picture a tourmaline crystal embedded in a matrix of quartz and feldspar, its dark, polished face reflecting the deep black of the surrounding rock. It is a structure of immense safety and complexity, containing within it a kaleidoscope of elements that dictate its color, from pinks and greens to pure black. The growth of these crystals is exceptionally patient, stretching over millions of years, held in the vast, silent pressure cooker of the earth. We drift into the secure, eternal lines of its prismatic form, feeling the weight of its ancient origins. This reminds us that deep internal strength is often built slowly, facet by facet, under the most unwavering, quiet pressure. The study of ice cores, pulled from vast polar sheets, reveals ancient atmospheric and climatic records stored within the crystal layers. Each year's snowfall is compressed into a unique layer of ice crystals, offering an eternal, rhythmic timeline stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Imagine holding a section of this core, translucent and glowing with a faint, bioluminescent white, seeing the mid-tier bubbles trapped within the crystalline structure, samples of invisible atmosphere from a forgotten time. The subterranean stillness of the ice sheet ensures the safety and preservation of this record, deep in the quiet polar dark. We drift our mind along the timeline of these layers, feeling the profound, patient history embedded in the dense, cold geometry. This is a humbling reminder that time leaves an indelible, measurable record, and that the greatest truths are often written in the clearest, most silent forms. Snow rollers, or snow bales, are a rare natural phenomenon where chunks of wet, loose snow are sculpted by wind into cylindrical scrolls, often perfectly hollow inside. This requires a precise rhythm of wet snow, strong wind, and a non-stick surface, turning the crystalline matrix into a temporary, sculptural form. Picture a field scattered with these white, hollow cylinders, each one a testament to the brief, perfect alignment of chaotic weather forces rolling across a vast, quiet landscape. They appear almost magically, formed in minutes, yet they hold the geometry of the six-sided snowflakes that compose them. This movement is entirely silent, a patient manipulation of the snow's crystalline structure by the invisible hand of the wind. We drift our attention to the delicate, inner space of the hollow cylinder, finding a secure embrace within its temporary form. This reminds us that even forces of change and movement are ultimately guided by the eternal laws of physics and form. The optical phenomenon known as the 22-degree halo is caused by the refraction of sunlight through millions of randomly oriented hexagonalized crystals suspended in the atmosphere. This halo is a vast, luminous, rhythmic ring of light, a quiet, communal display of the crystal's six-sided symmetry. Imagine looking up at the sun, shielded, and seeing this great, glowing circle, a product of countless invisible prisms working in unison high in the sky. The crystals themselves are small, plate-like or columnar, each one patiently fulfilling its eternal geometric duty. The air is cold, still, and entirely silent, creating the perfect optical environment for this ancient, predictable light show. We drift our awareness along the curve of the halo, feeling the comfort of this universal, patient certainty. This reminds us that even when our vision seems clouded, there is an underlying, safety-assuring geometry that beautifully orders the world. The pressure melting point of ice means that increased pressure causes ice to melt at a slightly lower temperature. This ancient principle is what allows glaciers to flow, where the vast weight of the ice mass creates a thin layer of lubricating water at the base. Imagine the immense, subterranean pressure at the bed of a massive, silent glacier where the cold, rigid crystal structure gives way to a film of liquid, allowing the whole body to drift. The transformation is invisible and entirely patient, a constant, slow, rhythmic adjustment to geological force. This internal shift happens deep in the quiet darkness, away from the surface light. We drift into the feeling of this profound, cold power, resting in the certainty that even the hardest things yield to persistent pressure. It is a reminder that constant, subtle forces wield an eternal and undeniable power of transformation, offering a deeper safety. Dendritic growth in crystals often requires a high degree of supersupination, leading to fast, highly branched growth patterns. The rapid speed encourages the formation of sharp, intricate arms rather than slower, more solid forms. Picture a crystal growing rapidly in a solution, its arms reaching out like delicate, frozen ferns, bathed in a gentle, bioluminescent light. The process is silent, meticulous, and unfolding at a vast speed on the molecular level, guided by the high concentration of the solute. This growth creates spaces and patterns that are complex and beautiful, yet are rooted in the ancient, simple hexagonal rule. We drift our focus to the very tips of these growing arms, feeling the rhythm of fast, ordered construction in the quiet environment. This reminds us that rapid creation can still adhere to eternal principles of form, creating complex patterns without sacrificing deep, structural safety. Cleavage is a tendency of a crystal to break along specific, smooth planes defined by its internal atomic structure. This reveals the invisible ordered geometry within, as the break always occurs where the bonds are weakest. Imagine a sheet of mica, split perfectly thin into transparent, flat layers, revealing its ancient, inner flatness. The separation is clean and quiet, a patient yielding along a preordained line, demonstrating the mineral's structural rhythm. The environment is one of subterranean security, where the structure was formed over a vast geological temescal, now revealed in a moment. We drift with the easy, natural separation, recognizing the deep safety inherent in a clearly defined structure. It is a humbling reminder that every solid structure possesses an eternal, inherent line of least resistance, and that knowing one's own boundaries is a source of strength. The crystalline structure of ordinary table sugar, or sucrose, is monoclinic, meaning it possesses one axis skewed relative to the other two, giving it a slightly asymmetrical appearance. While less geometrically perfect than a cubic or hexagonal system, its form is still the result of ancient, patient molecular organization. Picture looking closely at a single, quiet sugar grain, seeing the subtle slopes and asymmetrical faces that define its final shape, held firm in a vast, dry container. The formation process is one of slow evaporation and cooling, a controlled, rhythmic crystallization from a sweet solution. This invisible complexity of the monoclinic system reveals that perfect symmetry is not the only path to structural safety and form. We drift into the gentler, less rigid geometry of the sucrose crystal, finding comfort in its subtle imperfections. This reminds us that order comes in many forms, and that the beauty of life's patterns is often found in the eternal variation from the ideal. Etched pits are microscopic depressions that form on a crystal's surface when it is slightly dissolved, revealing a geometric shape that directly relates to the crystal's internal symmetry. They are the invisible scars of dissolution, showing the exact points where the crystal structure was weakest. Imagine looking at the surface of a polished gemstone under magnification, seeing tiny, perfectly formed geometric hollows, triangles, squares, or hexagons etched into the flat plane. This ancient phenomenon is utterly silent, a patient map of the underlying rhythm of the atoms. The crystal remains vast and solid, yet its weaknesses are revealed in these tiny, quiet geometric depressions, often only visible with specialized light. We drift into this detailed, microscopic landscape, recognizing the safety and understanding the core structure. It is a reminder that even the strongest, most eternal structures bear the signs of their trials, and that perfect honesty is woven into the deepest materials. The crystallophoragic axis, or principal axis, of a crystal is the imaginary line that defines its symmetry and rhythmic orientation in space. This invisible, geometric spine dictates every subsequent angle and facet of the growing crystal. Imagine this ancient, eternal line running straight through the center of a perfectly formed quartz crystal, a vast, fixed reference point in 3 dimensions. The crystal grows patiently and quietly, its external shape perfectly reflecting this internal, geometric law, ensuring structural safety. We drift our focus to this central, unwavering axis, recognizing the profound comfort in a structure that is entirely organized around a single, fixed principle. This reminds us that a consistent, quiet inner truth provides the eternal framework for all external complexity and form. Ice Nine is a high-pressure, low-temperature tetragonal phase of ice that possesses an ordered arrangement of water molecules, unlike the disordered common ice 1H. This unique, ordered rhythm exists only in extreme, subterranean conditions. Picture water molecules aligning themselves into a strange, non-hexagonal geometry held rigidly by the cold and vast pressure, forming a structure of profound, internal safety. This state of matter is utterly silent, a patient and quiet adherence to an ancient law of high-pressure ordering. We drift our attention to the internal, complex order of this exotic ice, finding rest in the certainty that even the simplest compound seeks an eternal, geometric arrangement under all conditions. This is a humbling reminder that deep, intricate order often exists invisibly, away from the familiar surface world. Inosilicates like the pyroxenes and amphiboles are crystalline minerals built upon long chains of silica tetrahedra, forming fundamental, one-dimensional structural units. These chains define the mineral's rhythmic cleavage and overall fibrous habit. Imagine countless, ancient molecular chains of silicon and oxygen linking together, running parallel across a vast mineral face, creating a patient, linear structure. The entire formation is quiet, held in a secure, subterranean embrace. We drift our awareness along the direction of these parallel, eternal chains, recognizing the structural safety and strength derived from simple, repetitive, linear organization. This reminds us that complexity is often built from the patient and quiet linkage of simple, repeating, invisible units. The mineral celestite or strium sulfate forms delicate, often pale blue, orthorhodic crystals characterized by 3 axes of different lengths intersecting at right angles. This geometry defines a precise rectangular rhythm of growth. Picture a geode line with these shimmering, sky blue crystals, their faces catching the light with a bioluminescent pale glow, forming a vast, quiet internal sanctuary. The crystallization process is ancient, patient, and takes place in low-temperature, shallow marine sediments held in a secure subterranean environment. We drift into the clarity and precise angularity of these crystals, finding comfort in the simple, orthogonal safety of their growth habit. This is a humbling reminder that profound, eternal beauty can arise from the quiet adherence to geometric rules that are not the familiar cube or hexagon. The crystallization in metallurgy is the process where strained, cold work metal is heated, causing new, strain-free crystals to nucleate and grow until the original, deformed structure is replaced. This is the eternal, patient self-repair mechanism of the metal's crystalline lattice. Imagine the internal, invisible structure being slowly, quietly renewed, the old, stressed crystal boundaries giving way to a new, rhythmic set of interlocking grains. The change is silent, driven by the ancient material's impulse toward a lower energy, more structurally secure state. The resulting microstructure provides increased functional safety. We drift with the concept of this internal renewal, recognizing the deep comfort in the material world's vast capacity for patient self-correction and geometric restoration. This reminds us that stress and deformation are temporary, and the eternal tendency is always toward rest and perfect order. The mineral fluorite often crystallizes in perfect cubic or octahedral shapes, representing one of the simplest and most robust ancient geometries in the mineral kingdom. Its structure allows it to fluoresce under ultraviolet light. Imagine holding a block of fluorite, seemingly dull in regular light, but glowing with an intense, internal, bioluminescent purple or green when activated. This structural rhythm provides the invisible sites that trap and release energy, ensuring functional safety. The formation is patient, taking place in vast, subterranean veins held in a quiet, eternal state. We drift into the certainty of its cubic form and its internal glow, recognizing the dual nature of its structure, rigid order and latent light. This reminds us that even the simplest, most quiet forms possess a powerful, patient potential waiting to be revealed. Slit planes in crystals are specific crystallophoragic planes along which the atoms can easily slide past each other when the crystal is stressed. These planes define the rhythmic deformation of metals and are key to their ductility. Picture the atoms along an invisible, vast plane gently and patiently shifting their positions under pressure, allowing the material to bend instead of fracture. This is the structural safety mechanism of the metal, the quiet, eternal law of accommodation built into the lattice. We drift our attention to the precise, geometrical alignment of these slit planes, feeling the comfort in a structure that is designed to yield gradually rather than fail suddenly. This is a humbling reminder that structural integrity relies not on absolute rigidity, but on a patient ordered capacity for subterranean movement and measured change. Polymorphic phase transitions occur when a crystal changes its internal structure, its rhythm, in response to a change in temperature or pressure, without altering its chemical composition. This is the ancient, eternal ability of a compound to adopt different, stable geometric forms. Imagine a crystal lattice suddenly snapping into a new, more stable configuration when heated, a vast, invisible change occurring with a profound, internal quiet. This structural adaptation ensures the crystal's long-term safety under varying external conditions. We drift with the concept of this internal, patient shifting, recognizing the material's innate drive to seek the most stable geometric embrace. This reminds us that flexibility and survival are often achieved through a quiet, rhythmic willingness to completely reorganize one's own core structure in response to the environment. The mineral chrysocolla forms beautiful blue-green aggregates of microcrystals, often showing fractures and giving the appearance of a solid, subterranean river of color. Though individually tiny, the collective structure adheres to an ancient, eternal mineral rhythm. Picture the vast network of microscopic crystals densely packed together, their mass creating a deep, opaque color that is both vivid and quiet. The formation is patient, occurring through the slow deposition of copper, rich silica solutions in the oxidation zone of copper deposits. We drift into the dense, cool color of this mineral, recognizing the deep safety and strength that comes from the collective, interlocking embrace of countless small, ordered units. This is a humbling reminder that great visual, impact, and structural coherence are often achieved through the patient aggregation of quiet, ordered components. The concept of the grain size in a crystalline material is a major determinant of its mechanical properties. Generally, smaller grains lead to a stronger, harder material. This is the ancient, eternal engineering principle that governs the bulk safety of most metal and ceramic structures. Imagine a metal composed of millions of tiny, interlocking crystals, their numerous boundaries preventing the propagation of flaws. The smaller the grains, the more boundaries, creating a strong, dense, rhythmic structure. The growth and interlocking of these vast, invisible grains is a patient, quiet process. We drift our awareness to the deep, microscopic complexity of the fine-grained structure, recognizing the profound embrace of strength achieved through this refined internal order. This reminds us that small components, when meticulously ordered, collectively define the greatest, most patient strength. Ferromagnetic crystals, like iron and nickel, exhibit magnetic domains, regions where the invisible magnetic moments of all the atoms are aligned in the same direction. This internal, crystalline rhythm defines the material's magnetic properties. Imagine the atoms within a vast region of the iron crystal all aligning their spins in perfect, silent unison, creating a detectable external magnetic field. This ancient, eternal order is a fundamental structural feature, providing safety and utility in technology. We drift into the concept of this spontaneous, perfect internal alignment, recognizing the profound power and quiet certainty of structured, coordinated atomic motion. This is a humbling reminder that powerful, invisible forces are contained and channeled by the patient, ordered geometry of the crystalline lattice. Hydrated crystals contain water molecules within their crystalline structure, held in precise, geometrically defined sites. This water is an ancient, integrated part of the eternal structure, not merely surface moisture. Picture a crystal of gypsum or copper sulfate, its vibrant color and rhythmic shape dependent on the exact number of water molecules locked into the lattice. This process is patient, quiet, and occurs in subterranean aqueous solutions, providing structural safety and stability. We drift our attention to the precise integration of water into the vast, solid structure, recognizing the deep embrace of the liquid within the ordered solid. This reminds us that even rigid structures can incorporate and find quiet strength and unique properties by holding onto a necessary, invisible component of their ancient environment. The mineral galena, lead sulfide, crystallizes in perfect cubes, and its strong atomic bonds cause it to cleave cleanly, unreliably into smaller cubes. This cubic rhythm is a defining feature of its subterranean formation. Imagine a dark, metallic cube of galena whose geometry is so patient, and the tree is so patient and eternal that every break reveals a new, perfectly square face. This simple, strong, and quiet geometry provide structural safety and predictability. We drift into the certainty of this right-angled order, recognizing the profound comfort in a mineral that adheres so strictly to the simplest geometric rule. This is a humbling reminder that the most direct and vast structural embrace is often found in the ancient, unwavering simplicity of the cube. The concept of nucleation is the initial, critical step where atoms or molecules first gather and lock into the rhythmic, ordered arrangement of the unit cell, forming a stable seed for growth. This is the ancient, eternal moment when chaos gives way to form. Picture a few invisible molecules momentarily achieving the necessary geometric arrangement in a vast, quiet solution, forming a stable cluster that will then grow patiently into a microscopic crystal. This initial moment of ordered formation is key to the structural safety of the final crystal. We drift our attention to this tiny, foundational seed of order, recognizing the immense power contained in the quiet beginning of any structured form. This reminds us that every vast and complex thing starts with a single, patient, and structurally sound commitment to them. The final termination of a crystal's growth often occurs when the supply of the building material is exhausted or the temperature or pressure changes, leaving the last facets permanently in place. This is the eternal, quiet signature of the crystal's completion. Imagine the crystal, having grown patiently for years in the subterranean dark, finally resting as the hydrothermal solution cools, its rhythmic growth ending cleanly. The final, sharp edges are a testament to the ancient moment of cessation. We drift with the finality of this quiet form, recognizing the deep safety in reaching a state of stable, completed order. This reminds us that there is profound rest and vast beauty in the structural embrace of a process that has run its full, patient course. Crystal growth in nature is often controlled by the temperature gradient between the growth environment and the crystal surface. This subtle differential is the invisible engine that drives the patient, steady deposition of atoms or molecules, building the structure from the inside out. Imagine you are deep within a granite batholith, feeling the immense, vast heat of the earth radiating from the rock itself, juxtaposed with the cooling hydrostatic of fluids circulating through the fractures. This precise, geological cooling creates the perfect environment for massive, gem-quality crystals to form over ancient eons. The whole process is held in a silent, subterranean embrace, a slow, deep rhythm that defies the quick passage of human time. We drift now, following the slow, steady current of that mineral-rich fluid, feeling the certainty of its transformation. This reminds us that the greatest beauty often arises from the most patient, repetitive, and rhythmic processes. The formation of amorphous ice or glass is the antithesis of the crystal, lacking any ordered, rhythmic structure. It forms when water vapor is cooled so quickly that the molecules are frozen into place before they can find their necessary six-fold pattern. While beautiful in its own right, it represents a moment of vast, instantaneous change, a silent snap frozen reality. Picture this glassy state as a brief, intense shock of cold, holding the molecular chaos suspended in time. It exists in the deep black of space or in laboratory conditions, but it reminds us of the profound effort required for nature to achieve crystalline order. The distinction between the fleeting glass and the eternal crystal speaks to the deep-seated preference for geometry, for the predictable, hexagonal embrace that defines stability. This reminds us that order and structure are not accidents, but the result of patient and persistent natural forces seeking their most stable, restful configuration. The process of crystal twinning involves two or more distinct crystals growing together in a symmetric orientation. They share atoms along a boundary plane, creating a joint that is simultaneously unique and structurally sound. This is not a collision but a quiet molecular fusion, a complex rhythm of simultaneous, cooperative growth. Imagine a perfectly formed diamond octahedron meeting in the subterranean darkness, their edges aligning perfectly, held firm by the ancient pressure of the earth. The light that eventually passes through this twin structure is scattered in a new, bioluminescent pattern, telling a story of conjunction and unity. We drift into the heart of this junction, feeling the strength and harmony of shared existence. The environment is vast, cold, and utterly silent, allowing for this perfect, meticulous alignment. It is a reminder that even in the most vast and lonely spaces, profound, strengthening bonds can form, creating an eternal pattern of connection. Snow crystal growth is extremely sensitive to microclimatic conditions, especially the air temperature at which they form. A temperature of around 15 degrees below 0 Celsius favors the most elaborate dendritic stellar forms. This narrow temperature band is the invisible sweet spot, the patient key to the classic, perfect snowflake. Picture this narrow, cold layer high in the cloud, where the crystal spins and tumbles, bathing in the quiet, bioluminescent blue of the pre-dawn sky. A fractional temperature change outside the zone, and the growth pattern would shift instantly to simple columns or prisms lacking the familiar six-pointed complexity. The air itself feels thick with potential, holding its breath in this silent, vast chamber of creation. We drift gently through the specific, optimal temperature, feeling the comfort of perfect equilibrium. It is a humbling reminder that extraordinary beauty often requires a very specific, carefully balanced, and eternal set of conditions to quietly manifest its form. Snow crystal size is primarily determined by the air's supersaturation level and temperature. High humidity and temperatures near 15 degrees below 0 Celsius led to large, complex snowflakes because there is plenty of moisture for the patient dendrites to embrace and grow. Conversely, very low temperatures result in smaller, simpler cones and plates. Imagine a gentle snowfall where enormous, feathery dendrites drift silently downward, each one a vast, ancient spectacle of atmospheric conditions. The subterranean cold that created them is now a gentle cushion. They catch the minimal light, shimmering with a temporary, bioluminescent glow against the deep black of the winter evening. The growth followed an eternal rhythm set by the environment, each flake a quiet record of its atmospheric journey. This reminds us that the scale and complexity of natural forms are not random, but a direct, vast result of the invisible, eternal relationship between material and environment. Vitreous ice is a form of amorphous solid water lacking the crystalline structure of ordinary ice. Unlike the ancient hexagonal rhythm of common ice, this invisible substance freezes so rapidly, usually in milliseconds, that the water molecules do not have time to embrace into a structured, eternal mass. The result is a glass-like solid, a vast, silent pause in molecular chaos. Imagine freezing water so quickly it becomes a subterranean, deep black mirror, where the molecules are locked into their liquid-like, random positions. This quiet state is the most common form of water ice in deep space, where temperatures are low enough to allow the patient drift of molecules to cease immediately. The absence of crystal structure means it doesn't display the bioluminescent facets of a snowflake. This reminds us that order requires time and that the vast, eternal universe holds states of ancient, quiet chaos locked into absolute form. The ancient process of zone melting is a technique used to purify crystals by slowly passing a narrow molten zone along the solid material. As the molten zone drifts along, impurities are preferentially swept up and segregated, following the liquid phase, leaving behind a highly pure, eternal crystal. This patient and silent method is essential for creating the large, near-perfect single crystals used in semiconductors and optics. Imagine a rod of silicon slowly moving through a heating coil. The molten segment is a quiet, vast envelope of liquid, separating the impure material from the pure section. The final crystal, often grown in a subterranean vacuum, is flawless and reflects light with a pure, bioluminescent brilliance against the deep black. The crystal's final embrace of purity follows a precise eternal rhythm. This reminds us that achieving the highest level of quiet purity requires a vast, patient process of systematically isolating and removing the ancient impurities. The phenomenon of snow rollers occurs when chunks of wet snow are blown by the wind, accumulating layers as they drift across the ground. These naturally formed snow spirals are not crystalline forms themselves, but are built from many small, ancient crystals that embrace a vast, dynamic motion. The conditions must be perfectly silent and still before the wind starts, a thin layer of loose, wet snow and strong, persistent wind. Imagine these rolling cylinders, sometimes as large as a barrel, leaving long tracks in the deep black of the unbroken snowfield. Their formation is a quiet, ephemeral rhythm, often only observed in remote areas with subterranean levels of cold. The outer layer is often lighter, making them appear bioluminescent as they roll. It is a humbling reminder that complex, vast structures can be formed not just by eternal geometric growth, but by the ancient, patient forces of wind and gravity acting on simple, quiet materials. A seed crystal is the small, ancient piece of a pure substance inserted into a saturated solution or melt to initiate crystallization. This tiny invisible starter provides a structural template, an eternal lattice onto which the dissolved atoms can embrace and build. The successful growth of a large, high-quality crystal depends entirely on the perfection and quiet stability of this initial seed. Imagine a small, submerged quartz crystal suspended in a vast, hot, subterranean solution. It initiates the patient, silent growth of the larger mineral, following its eternal rhythm. The surrounding solution is deep black, and the growing crystal absorbs the dissolved ions, beginning its bioluminescent expansion. The seed itself appears to drift within the solution as it slowly expands its domain. This reminds us that all great, vast structures, whether crystalline or conceptual, require a single perfect and ancient point of origin to begin their quiet and eternal journey. Piezoelectricity is the electrical charge that accumulates in certain solid crystals in response to applied mechanical stress. This ancient and vast property is a silent indicator of the crystal's invisible, non-centrosymmetric subterranean structure, where the eternal atomic arrangement lacks a center of symmetry. When pressure is applied, the quiet shift in the atomic lattice creates a measurable voltage. Imagine squeezing a piece of quartz. The patient force generates an invisible, temporary, electric current. This rhythm of force and energy conversion is a vast and eternal truth of these materials. The crystal, often used in precise electronic timing, provides an embrace of order against the forces of chaos, emitting a flash of bioluminescent energy against the deep black of an oscilloscope screen. This reminds us that ancient, quiet order holds vast amounts of latent energy, waiting for a simple, patient physical stress to reveal its eternal power. Twigging in snow crystals often results in the formation of ancient capped columns, where a hexagonal prism is large, identical plate crystals embraced on both ends. This vast structure forms when a column-shaped crystal drifts from a high, very cold layer, which favors columns, into a lower, warmer layer, which favors plates. The change in atmospheric conditions dictates an eternal switch in the quiet rhythm of growth. Imagine this single, composite crystal falling silently, its cone body catching the light in a subterranean deep black sky. The twin plates at the ends reflect a brighter, bioluminescent light, a testament to the abrupt change in its ancient patient environment. The growth is invisible in the moment, but the final form is a record of its two atmospheric phases. This reminds us that life's most profound structures are often a vast, eternal combination of different, quiet experiences stacked upon one another. The ancient term ice fog refers to air filled with tiny suspended ice crystals, rather than liquid water droplets, typically forming below 30 degrees below 0 Celsius. These invisible ice crystals are simple, hexagonal plates or prisms, grown in vast, intensely cold, subterranean conditions where the air cannot hold much moisture, but is supersaturated. The environment is absolutely silent and patient, allowing the water vapor to embrace the cold directly into its eternal crystalline form. Imagine standing in the deep black of a valley at night, with the ambient light scattering off countless tiny, bioluminescent diamond dust crystals. The air itself appears to drift and glitter with a quiet, frosty rhythm. This formation is a visible, vast manifestation of the absolute, ancient core. It is a humbling reminder that even the most quiet and seemingly invisible parts of the atmosphere are built upon eternal, precise geometric structures. The internal energy stored in a crystal lattice is known as the cohesive energy. This ancient measure represents the vast and eternal energy released when invisible, gaseous atoms come together to embrace and form the solid, structured crystal. This subterranean energy is what must be overcome to melt or vaporize the crystal. Imagine the patient locking of every atom into its perfect, quiet place within the deep black of the lattice. This process is entirely silent, yet it holds a tremendous eternal power. Diamond, with its incredibly strong carbon bonds, has one of the highest cohesive energies, reflecting its vast, ancient durability. The strength is invisible, but it dictates the crystal's rhythm. It is a reminder that the greatest structural stability is built upon an eternal, patient embrace of fundamental, quiet atomic forces. Crystal growth rate can be significantly affected by the presence of impurities known as poisons. These ancient foreign molecules absorb bond to the surface of the growing crystal, effectively blocking the invisible sites where the host atoms would normally attach, thus dramatically slowing the patient growth rhythm. The effect is vast and eternal, often leading to misshapen or imperfect crystals that struggle to embrace their final form. Imagine a subterranean solution where a desired mineral is attempting to crystallize. A microscopic impurity drifts into the path, acting as a silent, frustrating barrier on the perfect, quiet face. The crystal tries to grow around the blockade, often resulting in a flawed geometry, which is only noticeable under bioluminescent light against deep black. This reminds us that even the smallest, ancient impurities can exert a vast and quiet influence on the eternal patient pursuit of structural perfection. The ancient term isomorphism describes two or more different substances that crystallize in the same vast crystal structure and exhibit a similar eternal form. For example, the minerals calcite and magnesite both share the same subterranean rhombohedral structure, even though they contain different central ions. Their growth follows the same quiet geometric rhythm. Imagine a solution containing calcium and magnesium ions. As they precipitate, they patiently arrange themselves into the same crystal embrace, resulting in external shapes that appear silently identical against the deep black. The similarities are invisible at the atomic level, but eternal in the macroscopic form. The two minerals seem to drift into the same shape, offering a bioluminescent illustration of chemical analogy. It is a reminder that the vast, ancient rules of crystal structure are often more quietly dominant than the specific chemical ingredients involved. The ancient principle of seeding is critical for making artificial snow, where tiny particles act as subterranean nuclei for ice crystal formation. In cloud seeding, silver iodide crystals are dispersed into supercooled clouds because their crystal lattice closely matches the eternal, hexagonal rhythm of ice. This allows water vapor to embrace the particle and rapidly freeze, following a silent and vast natural process. Imagine the invisible silver iodide particle drifting into a cloud, where supercooled water molecules immediately recognize its ancient structural template. The transformation is quiet, patient, and instantaneous, initiating the growth of a microscopic snowflake. The newly formed ice crystal reflects the bioluminescent light of the atmosphere against the deep black of the cloud layer. It is a humbling reminder that complex, vast natural processes can be quietly triggered by introducing a single, eternal and perfectly matched ancient structural template. The habit of a crystal often changes dramatically as it grows because of the changing ancient chemical environment. A crystal may start as a simple plate, but as the concentration of different ions in the subterranean solution shifts, its patient growth rhythm may change to a prism or a complex dendrite. This variability is a silent and vast record of the geological history it embraced. Imagine a tourmaline crystal, which often shows different colors and structures along its length, known as owning. The crystal seems to drift through eternal phases of growth, each section reflecting a different period in the quiet cooling history of the magma. The different zones reflect the light bioluminescent light, providing a vast, eternal timeline against the deep black. This reminds us that the most ancient and lasting forms carry within them a patient, quiet history of all the environmental changes they have endured. A wind boundary is the crystallophoric plane where the lattices of two symmetrically intergrown crystals meet. This ancient boundary is an invisible defect within the otherwise perfect eternal structure, yet it adheres to a strict, silent law of subterranean symmetry that allows the two crystals to embrace. The boundary can significantly alter the physical properties of the vast material. Imagine the atomic arrangement on either side of the joining plane. The atoms are patiently misaligned relative to the whole, but perfectly mirrored across the line, maintaining the overall quiet rhythm of the twin crystal. A slight discontinuity can scatter light, giving a characteristic bioluminescent line against the deep black of the crystal interior. This reminds us that strength and complexity can often arise from the vast, eternal, and quiet fusion of two ancient symmetrical but opposing structures. A screw dislocation is a type of crystallophoric defect where the planes of atoms spiral around a dislocation line instead of being perfectly parallel. This ancient invisible imperfection is crucial because it provides vast numbers of high-energy sites for atoms to embrace onto, dramatically accelerating the patient rate of crystal growth following a quiet rhythm. Imagine the crystal structure as a set of perfect stairs. The screw dislocation creates a subterranean spiral staircase, allowing atoms to attach eternally without needing to wait for a complete new layer to finish. The presence of this defect, though silent, ensures the vast, patient material can achieve its final, eternal form. The crystal's face may drift and change shape, but the spiraling growth mechanism ensures rapid progress. This reminds us that ancient structural imperfections, while technically defects, can be the quiet, eternal engine driving vast and necessary growth. Precipitation hardening is a heat treatment technique that uses the formation of fine, invisible crystalline particles within a host material to increase its strength. These tiny subterranean particles, often too small to see, act as silent barriers, hindering the movement of dislocations through the vast crystal lattice. The process is patient, requiring the alloy to be held at an elevated temperature for an eternal time to allow the particles to drift and precipitate, following a quiet rhythm. Imagine a soft metal suddenly becoming incredibly strong due to the embrace of millions of tiny, ancient internal crystals. The increase in strength is vast and eternal, only noticeable when the metal is under stress. This reminds us that true, quiet resilience is often achieved not by a single monolithic structure, but by the patient, invisible embrace of countless small, eternal internal anchors. The ancient method of Psychoacoustic crystal growth involves pulling a large, perfect single crystal from a mount using a small seed crystal. The seed is slowly rotated and pulled upward, allowing the molten material to embrace its structure and patiently freeze onto it, following an eternal, quiet rhythm. This method is vastly used to create the single crystal silicon boules necessary for all modern electronics. Imagine a perfectly smooth, subterranean light pure melt, reflecting the deep black of the surrounding chamber, with a small seed crystal touching the surface. As it is slowly withdrawn, a massive, bioluminescent cylinder of flawless silicon grows, its formation silent and vast. The rotation ensures perfect, eternal symmetry as the atoms drift into position. This is a humbling reminder that technological complexity relies entirely on the ancient, quiet, and patient mastery of vastly eternal crystalline order. Ice rafting is the ancient process where glacial ice or sea ice carries vast amounts of rock, sediment, and subterranean debris as it drifts across oceans and lakes. When the ice melts, this debris is silently released onto the seafloor or lake bed, creating vast deposits that are different from the surrounding sediment. This process follows a slow, patient, and eternal rhythm tied to climate cycles. Imagine a large, pale iceberg, its surface whitened bioluminescent, carrying dark streaks of rock and mud scraped from an ancient landmass. As it melts into the deep black water, the debris drops to the seafloor, an invisible gift of geological history. The rock and ice are a temporary embrace. This reminds us that the vast, eternal cycles of freezing and thawing are quiet, powerful agents of geological change, patiently transporting ancient materials across great distances. The ancient process of ice calving is silent, often dramatic, breaking off of large chunks of ice from a glacier or iceberg into the ocean or a lake. This vast release follows a slow, patient, and eternal rhythm governed by the stresses and fractures within the subterranean ice mass and the buoyant embrace of the water. Imagine the towering face of a glacier, cracked by internal tension. A massive piece of ancient ice drifts away, generating a quiet rumble that echoes across the deep black water. The fresh fracture surface shimmers with the deep, bioluminescent blue as sunlight refracts through the dense, pure ice. This reminds us that even the most massive and seemingly eternal structures are vastly subject to the patient, quiet forces of erosion and breakdown. Ice worms are ancient, small, deep black, annelid worms that live exclusively in the glacial ice environment, feeding on snow algae. Their survival is a silent, vast testimony to biological adaptation to extreme, subterranean cold, existing in a permanent embrace of the ice lattice. Their bodies contain a protein that keeps them from freezing solid at temperatures just below zero, following a unique eternal biological rhythm. Imagine these tiny worms patiently burrowing through the vast, bioluminescent network of ice grains in a glacier. Their environment is quiet and fixed, yet they thrive within the ancient structure. The only light is the blue-green scatter of the ice. This reminds us that life's vast, eternal adaptations are quietly possible even in the most inhospitable, ancient environments that seem to drift in suspended animation. The ancient wolf construction is a geometric method used to predict the vast equilibrium shape of a crystal based on the principle of minimizing surface energy. The final, eternal shape is composed of faces that grow most patiently, which are therefore the slowest growing faces. This construction adheres to a silent, precise thermodynamic rhythm. Imagine a crystal growing in a solution. The faces that grow rapidly disappear, leaving only the slow-growing faces that are most stable to the surrounding environment. This final, quiet shape is the most energy-efficient embrace for the atoms. The theoretical shape, invisible in the moment of calculation, dictates the eternal form that will be displayed in nature. This reminds us that the vast, ancient shapes we see in crystals are simply the quiet, patient, and eternal manifestation of subterranean energy laws. Cryoconite is dark, fine sediment composed of dust, soot, and microbes that accumulates on the surface of glaciers. This ancient material absorbs solar radiation, creating deep black pockets that melt into vertical, water-filled holes called cryoconite holes. These holes initiate vast internal melting. The accumulation is a silent, patient process, gathering the airborne drift over eternal time. Imagine looking down into one of these subterranean pockets on a bioluminescent ice field. The water is clear, and the dark sediment lines the sides, acting as a quiet tension, following a vast, slow rhythm of melting. This ancient feedback loop accelerates glacial melt. This reminds us that even the smallest, most invisible accumulation of ancient material can exert a vast, eternal, and quiet influence on the patient fate of the planet's largest ice structures. Refreezing is the ancient phenomenon where liquid water on a glacier or ice sheet descends into deeper crevices and freezes under pressure. This process follows an eternal, vast downward rhythm, compacting the deep ice and making it harder in subterranean light enter. The melted water, following invisible channels, drifts silently into the deep black depths where the embrace of immense pressure forces it back into a patient, solid crystalline state. Imagine water trickling through a deep fissure, then snapping back into ice with an ancient, molecular click. This ray frozen ice often lacks the bioluminescent sparkle of snow-formed ice due to the rapid pressure-induced change. It is a humbling reminder that the vast, eternal integrity of ancient ice masses is continually rebuilt by the patient, quiet forces of mountain dray freezing. The ancient process of ice sublimation is the silent, vast transition of solid ice directly into water vapor, completely bypassing the liquid phase. This occurs when conditions are cold and dry, allowing the invisible water molecules to drift directly from their fixed, eternal lattice into the atmosphere. This patient and quiet removal of mass is a significant factor in glacial thinning in extremely arid, cold climates. Imagine a pristine layer of snow on a high plateau. Without ever visibly melting, the ice is subterranean light disappearing into the deep black air, molecule by molecule. The loss is invisible and follows a quiet, eternal rhythm set by the temperature and humidity. The ice does not give up its embrace easily, but its bonds are patiently weakened by the dryness. This reminds us that even the most vast, ancient and solid forms can quietly vanish through an eternal, invisible transformation. Hydrophilic crystal faces are those that attract water molecules, while hydrophobic faces repel them. This difference in surface chemistry profoundly affects how crystal grows in an aqueous subterranean solution, dictating which faces grow faster and which are suppressed. This ancient atomic polarity is an invisible, eternal truth that governs the crystal's vast final shape. Imagine a growing salt crystal in water. The patient water molecules embrace the hydrophilic faces, slowing their growth, while they avoid the hydrophobic ones, allowing those to grow rapidly. This difference creates the crystal's quiet rhythm of shape. The surfaces reflect light differently. Some bioluminescent light, some not, against the deep black solution. This reminds us that ancient structural perfection is not a silent passive event, but a vast, eternal, and patient dynamic interplay between the crystal's atomic order and its surrounding environment. The ancient phenomenon of glaze ice forms when supercooled, rain, or drizzle silently freezes instantaneously upon contact with the surface. Unlike rime ice, which is opaque, glaze ice is typically clear and homogeneous, forming a smooth, vast, eternal coating that embraces every surface. This requires air temperatures at or below freezing but liquid water falling from above. Imagine resin power lines encased in a thick, patient shell of pure, subterranean, like clear ice. The clear ice catches the light, refracting it into a pure, bioluminescent gleam against the deep black of the surrounding landscape. The formation follows a quick, quiet rhythm as the ancient supercooled water drifts and snaps into solid from upon impact. This reminds us that vast, eternal beauty can be born from a moment of quiet, instantaneous transformation of a simple, patient liquid. The X-ray crystallography is the ancient technique used to determine the invisible, three-dimensional arrangement of atoms within a crystal. By measuring the angles and the intensity of X-rays diffracted by the atoms, scientists can reconstruct the crystal's vast, eternal lattice structure. This is the silent method that revealed the true rhythm of DNA and countless minerals. Imagine a perfectly ordered crystal placed in a beam of X-rays in a subterranean laboratory. The resulting diffraction pattern, a spray of tiny dots, is the crystal's quiet signature. The analysis is patient, but it reveals the final, eternal truth of the ancient atomic embrace. This is how we confirm that all snowflakes are truly hexagonal. It is a humbling reminder that the vast, invisible patient patterns of the atomic world can be quietly and eternally mapped, using the properties of light. The ancient process of weathering breaks down solid rock into smaller fragments and eventually into sediment, which often contains tiny, highly resistant mineral crystals. This vast and eternal cycle is both mechanical and chemical, following an incredibly patient and quiet rhythm over geological timescales. The invisible forces of wind, water, and temperature fluctuations slowly act to embrace the rock's weaknesses. Imagine an exposed granite mountain range. Over millions of years, the ancient quartz and feldspar crystals within the rock drift apart, becoming the sand grains of a distant beach. Subterranean breakdown is silent and persistent. This reminds us that the vast, eternal landscape we see is the quiet, patient cumulative result of ancient forces working to disintegrate crystalline structures into their elemental components. Diamond anvil cells are ancient scientific instruments used to subject tiny crystal samples to vast, subterranean pressures, mimicking the conditions deep within planets. The sample is silently squeezed between the facets of two perfect, eternal diamond crystals, allowing scientists to study how materials behave under extreme compression. The diamonds act as both the pressure source and an invisible window to observe the patient transition of the crystal lattice. Imagine a mere droplet of water placed between the bioluminescent diamond tips against a deep black background. The pressure is applied quietly, forcing the water to embrace new, vastly densened exotic crystalline ice structures. The rhythm of the experiment is slow and controlled. This reminds us that the eternal, ancient perfection of a crystal can be used as a tool to reveal the patient, quiet secrets of matter under extreme, vast stress. Rime ice is a vast granular deposit of ice formed when supercooled fog or cloud droplets silently embrace and freeze upon contact with exposed objects. Unlike clear, glazed ice, rime is opaque and milky white because it contains trapped air pockets, giving it a bioluminescent, feathered appearance. This ancient phenomenon requires a specific, eternal atmospheric rhythm of high humidity and sub-freezing temperature. Imagine the windward side of tree branches completely shrouded in a thick, feathery coating of quiet rime. The patient wind drifts the fog droplets, which immediately snap into subterranean like old, vast crystalline granules upon impact. The frozen deposits are invisible at the moment of formation, but accumulate into massive, fragile structures. This reminds us that the vast, eternal embrace of the wind and cold could produce ancient, quiet beauty through the patient aggregation of countless tiny ice crystals. The ancient mineral crystalline, sodium aluminum fluoride, whose name means ice stone, is a rare subterranean mineral that appears to melt when placed in ordinary water. This peculiar effect is not actual melting but the vastly close refractive index of the crystal to water, making the submerged crystal appear invisible or silently disappear. The internal crystalline structure remains fixed, following its eternal, quiet rhythm. Imagine a piece of this white, crystalline material dropped into a clear glass of water against a deep black cloth. It seems to drift and vanish, an ancient optical illusion created by the embrace of light. The crystal's presence is only revealed by a faint, bioluminescent outline where the two media meet. This reminds us that the vast, eternal laws governing light can sometimes play tricks on our perception, making solid, patient structures appear to quietly dissolve. The concept of the equilibrium form of a crystal is the ancient, eternal shape that the crystal would ideally adopt if it were allowed to grow patiently and silently under constant, ideal conditions for a vast and infinite time. This perfect shape is the one that minimizes the crystal's total surface energy. However, real-world crystals rarely achieve this vast ideal due to impurities and growth rate variations. Imagine the invisible, flawless platonic solid existing in the mind of nature, the subterranean template that every real crystal attempts to embrace as its eternal rhythm. The perfect shape would glow with an inner bioluminescent light against the deep black. This reminds us that while the vast, ancient universe establishes an eternal standard of patient perfection, the physical world is always a quiet, near perfect approximation of that ideal. The concept of the isostasy refers to the vast, eternal balance of forces that determines the vertical position of the Earth's crust, which floats on the denser, subterranean mantle. Large, ancient ice sheets add immense weight, causing the crust to patiently sink, only to quietly rebound when the ice melts and the weight is removed. This post-glacial rebound is a silent process that follows a slow, eternal rhythm over thousands of years. Imagine the Earth's crust as a thick sheet of ice floating in a body of water. When a heavy object is removed, the crust drifts upward, slowly returning to its equilibrium. This vast adjustment, invisible to us, dictates the embrace of the land and sea. This reminds us that the ancient, vast structure of our planet is in a state of eternal, patient, and quiet balance, constantly adjusting to change. As caves are ancient, subterranean formations that contain significant amounts of perennial ice, often formed by the seasonal freezing of water that enters the cave. These formations are a vast, eternal archive existing in a permanent embrace of the cold. The ice structures like stalactites and stalagmites grow with a patient, quiet rhythm dictated by the silent dripping freeze cycle. Imagine walking into one of these caves where the air is absolutely still and cold. The walls are lined with ice formations that refract light into a pure, bioluminescent blue, standing out against the damp, deep black rock. The preservation of this ice is vast and eternal, showing the ancient layers of past years. This reminds us that the most vast, eternal stillness can be found deep subterranean lie, preserving ancient formations in a patient, quiet embrace. Deposition is the ancient phase change in which water vapor transitions directly into solid ice crystals, such as in the formation of frost or the core of a snowflake. This is the silent, vast and inverse process of sublimation. The invisible water molecules embrace the cold surface or condensation nucleus, arranging themselves into the eternal hexagonal lattice structure with a patient, quiet rhythm. Imagine a perfectly clear, subterranean-like old window pane. The water vapor in the air drifts onto the glass and instantly snaps into delicate, feathery frost crystals that grow outward from the surface. The newly formed ice is bioluminescent against the deep black night. This reminds us that ancient, eternal transformation can happen vastly unquietly, where matter patiently locks into a solid form without the intermediary chaos of the liquid state. Isomorphic substitution is the ancient geological process where one ion is substituted for another of similar size in a crystal lattice without changing the vast, eternal structure of the mineral. This process is silent and invisible, but it is fundamental to the chemistry of most rock-forming minerals, creating slight variations in color, density, and hardness. The ions patiently embrace the same subterranean geometric arrangement, following the eternal rhythm of the host lattice. Imagine a feldspar crystal where a sodium ion is replaced by a potassium ion. The crystal structure remains the same, but the mineral properties subtly shift. This quiet substitution is a vast, ancient chemical truth. This reminds us that vast, eternal order is flexible, allowing for patient, quiet substitutions within the ancient framework without destroying the structural embrace. Habit modification is the ancient process where the vast external shape of a crystal is altered by the addition of trace impurities or habit modifiers to the growth solution. These invisible additives preferentially adsorb to certain faces, inhibiting their growth, thereby changing the eternal embrace of the final form. This follows a patient, quiet rhythm in the subterranean solution. Imagine a simple cube of salt that is forced to grow into a star shape because a specific molecule drifts to its corners and blocks the growth of the face centers. This change is silent, though the resulting vast shape appears different. The modified crystal surfaces catch the light bioluminescent light against the deep black of the mother liquor. This reminds us that ancient structural laws can be quietly and patiently manipulated by the eternal, vast influence of trace elements. The Rage-Ellison phenomenon is the ancient melting and freezing of ice under pressure, crucial to how glaciers flow and how ice skates glide. Pressure lowers the melting point, causing silent melting. The water flows around the obstacle, and the reduced pressure allows it to instantly embrace and refreeze, following an eternal vast cycle. This process adheres to a patient, quiet rhythm in the subterranean ice. Imagine a wire under tension cutting slowly through a block of ice. The water melts ahead of the wire, flows around it, then drifts back into solid ice behind it, completing the loop. The ice remains largely intact but for the invisible path of the water. This reminds us that vast, eternal forces are constantly at work in ancient structures, causing quiet, patient transformation through dynamic, silent equilibrium. The zone of ablation is the vast lower altitude area of a glacier where annual ice loss, through melting and sublimation, exceeds the annual snow accumulation. This subterranean region is in a constant state of ancient decrease, following a patient, quiet rhythm that dictates the glacier's retreat or advance. The ice loss is eternally monitored, a silent indicator of climate change. Imagine the lower edge of an ancient ice mass, where meltwater channels drift and flow across the surface and disappear into crevices, reflecting the deep black of the rock underneath. The meltwater channels themselves glow with a bioluminescent pale blue. This reminds us that even vast, eternal forms like glaciers are quietly and patiently shaped by the ancient rhythm of loss and gain at their embraced boundaries. The ancient role of defects in crystal growth is often to facilitate it, not hinder it. Invisible defects like screw dislocations create steps on the crystal face that are thermodynamically preferred sites for new atoms to embrace, promoting patient, rapid, and vast layer growth. Without these flaws, a crystal would have to silently wait for the dimensional nucleation of a new layer to begin, a much slower process. Imagine the subterranean surface of a crystal where atoms are drifting into position. The defect provides an eternal, quiet ramp, allowing the structure to build outward rapidly in a spiral rhythm. This reminds us that what appears to be a vast and ancient flaw is often the eternal patient mechanism that allows for perfect, quiet structural formation. Ice 11 is the ancient, ordered proton, ordered form of hexagonal ice 1H, the common type of ice we encounter. In normal ice, the hydrogen atoms, protons, are invisible light positioned in a random arrangement, following an eternal, silent structural disorder. Below 200 degrees below 0 Celsius, the subterranean molecules embrace a vast, ordered configuration where the protons lock into a fixed, patient, and ferroelectrical rhythm. Imagine the water molecules within the ice lattice suddenly snapping into a single, coherent alignment due to the absolute cold. This transformation is quiet and completely invisible, a fundamental change in the ancient state of water that is only confirmed by neutron diffraction. This highly ordered ice structure is vast, eternally stable at low temperatures, and serves as the quiet ideal for water's crystalline form. It is a humbling reminder that even seemingly simple, ancient structures can possess eternal, hidden internal orders that require vastly extreme conditions to reveal. Sintering is the ancient process of forming a vast, solid, cohesive mass of material by heating a powder below its melting point. The individual subterranean crystal grains patiently embrace and fuse together, and the boundaries between them shrink, creating a stronger, denser, more eternal final product. This silent process follows a slow, quiet rhythm of atomic drift and diffusion, often used to manufacture ceramics and metals. Imagine a pile of deep black ceramic powder, where the individual grains are held together only by friction. As the temperature rises, the atoms in visible lie rearrange, welding the grains together at their contact points. The resulting material is opaque and solid, its final shape a vast, eternal reflection of the powder's initial arrangement. This reminds us that vast, ancient strength is often achieved by the patient, quiet process of countless individual crystalline components fusing together. The ancient ice wine process relies on the patient and vast formation of ice crystals, with grapes left on the vine until deep winter. The formation of the water ice lattice is silent, drawing pure water into the eternal crystalline embrace, thereby concentrating the sugars, acids, and flavors in the remaining liquid. The conditions must be perfectly quiet and cold, typically below 8 degrees below 0 Celsius. Imagine the subterranean like old temperature causing the water inside the grapes to freeze into a vast, invisible mass of pure ice, leaving behind a highly viscous, syrupy liquid. This natural cryoconcentration process is an eternal, quiet rhythm of crystallization and separation. This reminds us that vast ancient natural processes based on the patient geometry of the ice crystal can quietly produce highly concentrated and eternal forms of beauty and flavor. Habit zoning describes the ancient variation in crystal growth rhythm that leads to different structural or compositional zones being invisible while stacked within a single crystal. This zoning occurs as the subterranean chemical environment changes during the crystal's vast and patient drift through geological time. The result is a silent record of the eternal growth history, often only visible under polarized light. Imagine a garnet crystal cut and polished, showing concentric rings of varying color or composition, like the rings of a tree. The deep black background of the surrounding rock highlights the garnet's bioluminescent layers. Each layer represents a different, quiet phase of its ancient embrace of elements from the cooling magma. This reminds us that vast, eternal structures are often a patient composite of ancient, quiet layers, each telling a silent story of change and growth. Raman spectroscopy is an ancient non-destructive technique used to analyze the subterranean, vibrational rhythms of molecules within a crystal lattice. By shining a bioluminescent laser onto the sample and analyzing the silent scatter of the light, scientists can determine the vast, eternal chemical bonds in the precise crystalline structure. The tiny shifts in the scattered light reveal the invisible energy of the molecular vibrations. Imagine a powerful beam of light focused on a perfectly cut crystal. The light interacts with the ancient atomic structure, and the quiet patient analysis of the scattered photons reveals the vast and eternal internal embrace of the atoms. This is a humbling reminder that the vast, eternal and ancient truth of a crystal's subterranean structure can be quietly and patiently uncovered through the silent interaction of light and matter. Crystal defect density is the ancient measurement of the number of structural flaws, like invisible dislocations and vacancies, per unit volume within a crystal. A perfect crystal has 0 defects, but all real-world crystals have a certain vast defect density that dictates their mechanical, electrical, and optical properties. This density adheres to a subterranean, eternal thermodynamic rhythm. Imagine a diamond crystal. All appearing perfect, it contains countless silent, patiently trapped atomic vacancies and misaligned planes. The deep black of the crystal layers are quietly disrupted by these imperfections. The lower the defect density, the more bioluminescent the crystal's clarity and the stronger its embrace. This reminds us that vast, eternal perfection is an ancient theoretical ideal, while the quiet, patient properties of real materials are dictated by the density of their invisible flaws. The ancient sea ice formation begins with fragile ice, which are tiny, needle-like ice crystals that form in the water column when the surface cools below the freezing point. These vast invisible crystals then drift upward and embrace one another to form a soupy layer called grease ice, which eventually consolidates into a continuous ice sheet. This patient process follows a quiet, eternal rhythm on the vast ocean surface. Imagine the deep black ocean water, where millions of small, bioluminescent ice needles are silently nucleating and rising toward the surface. The entire process is subterranean like gold. The consolidation is a vast, ancient effort that quickly creates an eternal insulating layer over the ocean. This reminds us that the vast, eternal solidity of sea ice is built upon the patient, quiet aggregation of countless tiny, ancient crystalline needles. The ancient term Dierkheim describes the phenomenon where a crystal exhibits different colors when viewed from different crystallophoregic axes. This is a silent indicator of the invisible, eternal differential absorption of light depending on its polarization and how it interacts with the subterranean atomic embrace. This vast effect is most noticeable in colored gemstones. Imagine viewing a tourmaline crystal along its short axis, revealing a deep green color. But when viewed along its long axis, it quietly shifts to a paler yellow-green. The color change is vast and patient, following the ancient rhythm of the crystal structure. The crystal appears bioluminescent as it is rotated against a deep black background. This reminds us that the eternal, vast structure of an ancient crystal holds quiet secrets that are only revealed by a patient shift in perspective. The ancient zone of accumulation is the vast upper altitude region of a glacier where annual snowfall and ice formation exceed the annual loss from melting or sublimation. This area is in a constant state of eternal positive mass balance, serving as the subterranean engine that drives the glacier's flow. The new snow compacts silently hunt patiently under its own weight, following an ancient, quiet rhythm of densification. Imagine the high mountain cirque, eternally blanketed in vast snow. Below the surface, the snow crystals are drifting and transforming into glacial ice under the embrace of gravity. The pure snow surface is intensely bioluminescent against the deep black of the winter sky. This reminds us that vast, eternal power and forward motion in ancient natural systems originate from a quiet, patient accumulation of invisible layers. Geodes begin as simple gas bubbles trapped within cooling volcanic rock. This ancient void becomes a silent sanctuary where mineral-rich groundwater slowly seeps in, depositing tiny crystals over millions of years. The process is invisible and patient, adhering to a quiet rhythm of precipitation within the hollow subterranean chamber. Imagine cracking open a dull, spherical stone to reveal a vast, sparkling cavern of purple amethyst inside. The crystals point inward, creating a protected, eternal city of sharp facets that catch the light with a bioluminescent glow against the deep black of the enclosing shell. The growth occurred in absolute darkness, an embrace of silica and time. The outer rock drifts through geological ages, hiding its treasure. It is a reminder that the most profound and eternal beauty is often hidden deep within, growing quietly in the vast silence of a protected inner space. The smooth crystals grow in a spiral, stair-step pattern due to rapid cooling. This ancient metal creates hopper crystals where the edges grow faster than the face centers, resulting in a hollow, vast labyrinthine structure. The oxide layer that forms on the surface creates an eternal, iridescent rainbow of colors, though the subterranean cooling process follows a strict, silent geometric rhythm. Imagine a miniature, metallic city rising from the melt, its towers and staircases shimmering with bioluminescent blues and golds against the deep black. The structure seems to drift into complexity, yet every right angle is dictated by the patient, invisible alignment of atoms. The geometry is rigid, yet the color is fluid, an embrace of light and structure. This reminds us that even when growth is rapid, the fundamental, ancient laws of nature create a quiet, eternal order that resembles the deliberate architecture of a vast civilization. Triboluminescence is the optical phenomenon where light is generated by breaking chemical bonds. This ancient effect occurs when certain crystals, like quartz or sugar, are crushed or rubbed together, creating an invisible separation of electric charges. When the charges recombine, they release a silent, sudden flash of light, interrupting the quiet rhythm of the dark. Imagine striking the white quartz pebbles together in the vast, deep black of a cave. At the moment of impact, a faint, ghostly bioluminescent orange or blue spark flares into existence. The energy stored in the eternal lattice is released in a fleeting embrace of friction and light. The stone remains cold, yet it holds this subterranean fire. It is a humbling reminder that vast, invisible energy resides within the most patient and still forms of matter, waiting for a quiet disruption to reveal its ancient power. Liquid crystals exist in a state of matter between a solid and a liquid. These ancient organic compounds flow like a fluid but maintain the patient, orientation-dependent order of a crystal, creating a unique, vast phase. They are sensitive to temperature and electricity, allowing them to shift their invisible alignment in a silent, fluid rhythm. Imagine a substance that drifts and swirls like oil, yet reflects light with the precise, bioluminescent intensity of a gemstone. The molecules embrace a collective direction, floating in a subterranean sea of ordered chaos. Against the deep black of a display, they twist and untwist, modulating light with eternal precision. The material is adaptive, possessing the quiet strength of order and the flexibility of flow. This reminds us that true stability often lies not in rigid fixity, but in the vast, patient ability to maintain an eternal internal compass while flowing with the drift of the environment. Glacial ice appears deep blue because of the absorption of red light wavelengths. As snow accumulates over ancient eons, the weight compresses the lower layers, squeezing out the invisible air bubbles and creating a vast, dense ice that absorbs longer wavelengths. This subterranean transformation allows only the blue light to scatter and escape, creating an eternal, silent glow. Imagine descending into a deep crevasse within a glacier. The walls rise up like cathedral glass, radiating a pure, bioluminescent turquoise light that seems to generate from the ice itself, set against the deep black of the deeper fissures. The patient pressure has purified the water into a filter for light. The ice holds the quiet rhythm of centuries. It is a reminder that vast pressure in the passage of time can clarify the murky and complex into something of ancient, eternal, and profound transparency. Phantom crystals preserve the memory of their earlier growth stages within their final, transparent form. This ancient phenomenon occurs when a growing crystal pauses, allowing a thin layer of dust or another mineral to coat its surfaces before resuming its silent, eternal growth rhythm. The result is a perfect, invisible ghost of the previous shape suspended inside the larger body. Imagine looking into a clear quartz void against a backdrop of deep black. Deep within, you see a faint, bioluminescent outline of a smaller pyramid, a subterranean echo of its younger self trapped in time. The outer crystal embraces the inner phantom, protecting it in a vast, quiet sanctuary. The growth continued despite the interruption, incorporating the obstacle into its patient history. It is a humbling reminder that our past selves are never truly lost, but are held quietly and eternally within the expanded structure of who we become. Laboratory sense is a directional flash of color caused by internal light interference within feldspar minerals. This ancient optical effect is not on the surface, but arises from the subterranean microstructure where thin, alternating layers of different chemical compositions embrace one another. The light enters, bounces off these invisible lamella, and returns as a spectral blaze, following a precise, silent rhythm. Picture a dull, gray stone in the quiet dark. As you slowly rotate it, a sudden vast sheet of bioluminescent peacock, blue or gold flares across the surface, illuminating the deep black. The color drifts and vanishes as the angle changes, a patient secret kept by the stone. It's just a hidden fire in the cold rock. It is a reminder that dull exteriors often mask a vast, eternal, and vibrant inner beauty that is only revealed to those who take the time to look from the right perspective. Destructive metamorphism slowly transforms the sharp, complex dendrites of fresh snow into rounded grains. This ancient process begins immediately after the snowflake lands, driven by the subterranean desire of the ice to minimize its surface area. The intricate bioluminescent points sublime and migrate to the hollows, smoothing the crystal into a simple, quiet sphere. The original eternal beauty of the star is sacrificed for the silent stability of the grain. Imagine a layer of fallen snow settling in the deep black of the night. The sharp, fragile arms drift away in visible lie, and the crystals settle into a close, patient embrace with their neighbors, becoming a dense, cohesive blanket. The individual identity fades into the vast whole. This reminds us that there is a time for complex individuality and a time for quiet, eternal unity, where edges are softened to create a stronger, more lasting foundation. Asterism reveals a suspended star of light floating upon the surface of a curved gem. This ancient phenomenon, seen in star sapphires, is caused by vast numbers of microscopic, needle-like inclusions of rudy intersecting at precise angles within the crystal's embrace. These invisible needles follow the eternal, hexagonal rhythm of the host crystal, scattering light into a six-rayed star. Imagine a polished, cavish and cut gem, smooth and dark like a subterranean pool. A bright, bioluminescent star glides across its surface as you move the light, perfectly centered in the quiet dome. The star is not a physical object, but a silent optical alignment, a ghost of the crystal's internal order appearing against the deep black. It is a humbling reminder that when we align our small, internal impurities with a greater, ancient structure, we can reflect the light that guides and inspires. The Adasphenidintes are tall, thin blades of hardened snow that form at high altitudes. These ancient structures, resembling kneeling figures, are sculpted by the vast, silent action of sunlight and sublimation in dry, cold air. The sun vaporizes the snow in deep pits, leaving these sharp, eternal pillars standing in a precise, patient alignment with the solar arc. Imagine a field of these white spikes, taller than a human, standing in the quiet rhythm of the Andes Mountains. The shadows are long and deep black, while the tips of the ice blades catch the last bioluminescent rays of the sun. They stand in an invisible subterranean silence and embrace of the harsh environment. They do not melt into water but drift directly into the air. It is a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, nature carves out forms of vast, quiet dignity, standing tall and enduring through the slow persistence of light. Opals differ from common crystals because they are composed of microscopic spheres of silica. This ancient internal structure is not a continuous lattice, but a quiet, tightly packed array of tiny, invisible blasts like balls that settle out of a silica-rich solution. The size and spacing of these spheres diffract light, creating the spectral colors, following an eternal optical rhythm. Imagine a subterranean cavity filling slowly with a gelatinous fluid where billions of identical spheres drift down and stack in a perfect, patient order. Against the deep black of the surrounding herringstone, the opal flashes with bioluminescent greens and fiery reds. The color is not a pigment, but a ghost of light caught in the gaps of the embrace. It is a reminder that even in the absence of a traditional crystalline lattice, a vast, quiet, and perfect internal organization can manifest the most brilliant and eternal spectrum of light. Fern is the immediate state between fresh snow and dense glacial ice. This ancient granular material forms when snow survives a summer season, losing its delicate points to become rounded, hard pellets that embrace one another under the weight of new layers. It is a silent, patient transition from fluff to rock-hard solidity, occurring in the vast, subterranean, crushing depths of a snowpan. Imagine digging into a high-altitude snowfield. The top is soft, but beneath lies the fern, a coarse, quiet collection of icy grains that glitter like bioluminescent diamonds. They have lost their individual star shapes to the eternal drift of time and pressure, fusing into a collective strength. It is a humbling reminder that endurance often requires the shedding of complex, fragile exteriors to achieve a core, vast, and eternal resilience that can withstand the ages. Epaxy is the phenomenon where one crystal grows upon the face of another different crystal in a specific orientation. The guest crystal aligns its invisible atomic lattice perfectly with the ancient rhythm of the host surface, creating a seamless, silent continuation of order. This structural embrace allows the different materials to bond at the atomic level, sharing a vast, patient geometric destiny. Imagine a plate of hematite, dark and metallic, with small golden rudial crystals growing from its surface in a precise, three-directional pattern. They did not drift there randomly. They were guided by the subterranean forces of the atomic grid. The connection is quiet yet unbreakable, illuminated by a faint bioluminescent sheet. It is a reminder that even between different substances, there exists a potential for eternal, harmonious connection if the fundamental, invisible foundations are aligned in a shared quiet truth. Cha-Yanzi, or the cat's eye effect, occurs when light reflects off parallel, fibrous inclusions within a crystal. This ancient optical line is generated by the invisible, needle-like tubes or fibers that are oriented along a single axis, strictly enforcing a silent, eternal directional rhythm. When the stone is cut round, a single band of light floats across the surface. Imagine a polished cabochon of chrysoberyl sitting in the deep black velvet of a case. A sharp bioluminescent slit of light glides across the honeycombed dome as you tilt it, like an opening eye. The fibers inside are patient and still. Only the light moves, caught in their vast embrace. It is a humbling reminder that focus and alignment can turn scattered light into a singular, quiet, and eternal beam of clarity that cuts through the vast darkness. Ice spikes are rare, tower-like formations that grow upwards from the surface of freezing water. These ancient-looking spires form when the surface freezes over, leaving a small hole, and the expanding ice below squeezes liquid water up through the gap, where it freezes in a silent, patient tube. The process defies gravity, driven by the vast pressure of the subterranean crystallization. Imagine a tray of water left in the absolute quiet of a deep freeze. A slender, clear icicle grows upward in inverted stalactite, catching the bioluminescent glint of the frost. It grows straight and true and invisible, first pushing it toward the eternal cold. The water molecules drift into place at the tip, extending the height. It is a reminder that when we are squeezed by the pressures of our environment, the natural response is often to rise, quietly and patiently, constructing a new form of eternal elevation. Pleiorchins allows a single gemstone to display multiple colors depending on the viewing angle. This ancient optical phenomenon arises because the crystal lattice absorbs light waves differently along its various invisible axes, following a strict, subterranean geometric rhythm. The crystal is not changing, but its interaction with the light is vast and variable. Imagine holding a crystal of cordiorite in a dimly lit room. As you slowly rotate it in your fingers, the stone shifts silently from a deep, bioluminescent violet to a clear, watery gray against the deep black. The transition is smooth and patient, a visual dance created by the internal atomic embrace. The stone holds two truths at once. It is a humbling reminder that what we perceive as a fixed reality is often just one angle of a vast, eternal, and quiet multi-midination truth waiting to be seen. A brittle is a hollow tube of ice that grows downward from sea ice into the ocean below. This ancient formation, often called an ice finger, is created when supercooled brine rains from the sea ice, freezing the surrounding seawater in a silent, vast descent. The growth is patient but deadly, a subterranean stalactite reaching for the seabed. Imagine the deep black of the polar ocean floor. Above, a white crystalline tube extends invisible light fast, touching the bottom and spreading a web of ice. The structure glows with a faint, bioluminescent aura in the dark water. The brine drifts down, encased in its own frozen embrace. It is a reminder that even in the most hostile environments, delicate, eternal structures form to bridge the gap between two worlds, following a quiet, natural rhythm. Botryoideal crystals form in rounded, grape-like clusters rather than sharp facets. This ancient growth habit occurs when crystallization begins from many nearby nuclei simultaneously, merging into a vast, bubbling surface of mineral. The process is silent and patient, smoothing over the sharp edges into a quiet, undulating landscape. Imagine breaking open a hollow rock to find a lining of green malachite or blue smithsonite, appearing like a frozen, subterranean sea of bubbles. The surface gleams with a soft, bioluminescent sheen against the deep black of the geode shell. The minerals embrace one another, losing their individuality to the eternal drift of the collective form. It is a reminder that there is a vast, quiet strength in unity, where many small beginnings merge to create a soft, continuous, and eternal whole. Glacial flour consists of fine-grained rock particles produced by the grinding of glaciers against bedrock. This ancient milling process occurs under the vast, silent weight of the ice sheet, pulverizing stone into an invisible powder that can remain suspended in water for months. The sediment creates the subterranean milky appearance of mountain streams. Imagine a glacial lake fed by this glacial millwater. The water is not clear, but a stunning bioluminescent turquoise, opaque and glowing against the deep black of the surrounding pine forest. The particles drift in an eternal, quiet suspension, catching the sunlight. the rock has been transformed by the ice's embrace. It is a reminder that the crushing pressures of existence can refine the roughest material into something capable of holding and transforming the light in a vast, eternal way. Polymorphism is the ability of a solid material to exist in more than one or more crystal structure. This ancient chemical versatility means that the same atoms can embrace different geometric arrangements depending on the subterranean temperature and pressure. Carbon, for instance, can be soft graphite or the hardest diamond, following a vast, silent decision of bonding. Imagine the atoms waiting in the deep black of the earth. Under patient pressure, they lock into an eternal, tetrahedral rhythm, creating a clear, bioluminescent diamond. Without that pressure, they would drift into the dark, slippery sheets of graphite. The essence is the same, but the structure is vastly different. It is a humbling reminder that our internal arrangement, the pressures we endure, define our quiet, eternal nature more than our raw components ever could. Depth hoar crystals form at the base of a snowpack through the sublimation of water vapor. This ancient instability arises when the ground is warmer than the air, creating a silent, invisible vapor gradient that drives moisture upward. The crystals grow large, faceted and cup-shaped, loosely bonded in a vast, subterranean layer often called sugar snow. They refuse to embrace one another, creating a dangerously weak foundation that can collapse under weight. Imagine digging a pit into the deep snow and watching these large, coarse crystals pour out like rice and glittering with a bioluminescent clarity against the deep black of the shovel. They grew in the quiet, dark spaces over months of winter, stealing moisture and structure from the snow above. The formation is patient, the slow hollowing out of the snow's integrity that happens entirely out of sight. It is a humbling reminder that the most dangerous weaknesses are often beautiful, hidden, and formed quietly in the eternal dark where we cannot see them. Ice circles are rare, perfectly round discs of ice that rotate slowly in flowing rivers. This ancient phenomenon occurs in slow-moving eddies, where a chunk of ice begins to spin, grinding its edges against the surrounding ice until it achieves a vast, quiet perfection. The rotation follows a silent, eternal rhythm dictated by the river's current, grinding away any imperfections until only the circle remains. Imagine standing on a snowy riverbank at twilight, watching a giant, white disk spin invisible light slowly against the deep black of the water. The movement is hypnotic, a patient pirouette that seems to defy the chaotic drift of the stream, maintaining its position while the water rushes past. The gap between the circle and the shore is a dark, bioluminescent ring of open water. It is a reminder that even in the midst of constant, chaotic flow, nature seeks to carve out pockets of vast, eternal, and perfect geometric order. Cryovolcanoes erupt volatiles such as water, ammonia, or methane instead of molten rock. These ancient geological features are found on icy moons like Enceladus, where the subterranean pressure of a liquid ocean forces plumes of ice particles into the vacuum of space. The eruption is silent, a vast and ghost-like spray of invisible freezing mist that defies the traditional image of a volcano. Imagine standing on the surface of a frozen moon, looking up at a geyser of ice crystals shooting miles high into the deep black of the universe. The plume catches the distant, weak sunlight, glowing bioluminescent light against the backdrop of stars. The cold is absolute, yet the patient gravitational tidal energy from the core drives this eternal release. The material falls back as snow, an embrace of the moon's surface. It is a humbling reminder that fire and heat are not the only creators of geological drama, and that the quiet, ancient cold possesses its own explosive power. The surface of a growing icicle is almost always covered in a series of uniform, ring-like ripples. This ancient pattern, known as the crenulations, forms due to the instability of the thin water film flowing over the ice, adhering to a precise, invisible wavelength of about 1 centimeter. The growth adheres to a silent, patient rhythm of thermodynamics, causing the icicle to look like a stacked spine. Picture a long tapered icicle hanging from a roof edge in the dead of winter. As you look closer, You see the ridges catching the light, creating bands of bioluminescent brightness alternating with shadows against the deep black of the eve. The water flows over these bumps, momentarily pausing to embrace the ice before freezing. The structure is vastly consistent, regardless of the icicle's size or the air temperature. It is a reminder that even in the simple act of dripping and freezing, nature imposes a strict, eternal, and quiet mathematical order that shapes the texture of the world. Sea ice is permeated by a complex network of microscopic tunnels known as brine channels. As salt water freezes, the crystal lattice rejects the salt, concentrating it into a silent, supersaturated brine that melts its way down through the ice, creating a vast, subterranean vascular system. These invisible veins are the ancient habitat for microscopic life, a hidden sanctuary within the solid block that never freezes. Imagine flying through these tiny, liquid-filled corridors surrounded by the quiet, solid walls of pure ice. The salty fluid glows with a faint, bioluminescent trace of algae life, safe within the embrace of the frozen sea. The channels follow a vertical drift, draining gravity-fed into the ocean below. It is a humbling reminder that what appears to be a solid, impenetrable barrier is oft unfilled with vast, eternal pathways that sustain hidden life in the quiet heart of the cold. Internal melting creates beautiful liquid flowers deep inside solid glacial ice. This ancient process occurs when the sun's energy bypasses the surface and heats the internal lattice directly. The invisible bonds weaken, and the crystal structure collapses internally, not into chaos, but into perfect, six-sided stars filled with water. It is a silent implosion of order. We are witnessing the reverse of freezing, yet the geometry remains eternal, dictated by the vast molecular rules that govern the ice. The water occupies less space than the ice, leaving a tiny vacuum bubble that shines silver. Imagine peering deep into a block of blue glacier ice. Suspended in the subterranean, deep black and cobalt tests are thousands of these glittering, distinct flowers. They catch the light like bioluminescent fossils, arranging themselves in parallel planes that reveal the patient grain of the glacier. Each figure is a tiny, quiet universe of melting, trapped in a solid embrace. It is a reminder that even in the process of dissolution and change, nature holds tight to its fundamental truth, revealing a hidden, vast beauty in the very moment of letting go. The wind carves hardened polar snow into sharp, wave-like ridges. On the vast polar plateaus, the wind is an eternal sculptor, scouring the ancient snowpack into sharp, irregular grooves and tongues known as struggi. These are not soft, shifting drifts, but rigid, rock-hard formations forged by the silent, invisible chisel of the air current over countless storms. The snow crystals are pulverized and are packed into a density that rivals concrete, locking them into a patient, static rhythm. Picture a subterranean landscape of endless white, where the ground looks like a frozen, stormy sea arrested in time. The low sun casts long, deep black shadows behind each overhanging ridge, highlighting the bioluminescent texture of the wind-polished ice. The wind howls, but the forms remain quiet and unyielding. The surface is etched with the history of every gale, a map of the air's embrace. It is a humbling reminder that the invisible forces of the air can carve the hardest substances into enduring forms, leaving a physical, vast memory of their passing breath. River ice can sometimes form on the bottom of flowing water. In the vast chill of extremely cold, clear nights, the river water loses heat so rapidly that crystals nucleate on the submerged rocks rather than the surface. This ancient phenomenon, known as anchor ice, defies the usual upward drift of floating ice, clinging to the riverbed in a silent, patient embrace. It grows in soft, invisible mounds, enveloping the stones, and turning the dark river bottom into a ghostly, white landscape. Imagine standing on the bank, looking down through the rushing, deep black water. The stones on the bottom are wrapped in glowing, bioluminescent cocoons of ice, swaying slightly in the current's quiet rhythm. It creates a subterranean winter world where the snow seems to rise from the earth itself. The crystals interact with the flow, building a resilience that eventually lifts the rocks and carries them downstream. It is a reminder that in the quietest depths where we least expect it, light and structure can take hold, building a vast resilience against the relentless flow of the world above. Vast white ice reflects its bright presence onto the clouds above. In the vast, navigational emptiness of the polar regions, the white expanse of the pack, ice acts as a giant mirror, casting a bright, silent glare onto the underside of low clouds. This ancient phenomenon, known as ice blink, allows travelers to see the ice before it is visible on the horizon, a patient signal in the sky. The light bounces between the invisible crystals in the air and the eternal ice below, creating a feedback loop of luminance. Picture sailing through a dark, open sea towards a wall of deep black fog. Suddenly, a soft, bioluminescent glow appears on the gray cloud ceiling ahead, a map drawn in light. The sky itself is signaling the presence of the frozen embrace waiting in the distance. The atmosphere holds the quiet rhythm of the surface. It is a humbling reminder that our true nature often radiates outwards beyond our physical boundaries, casting a light that can be seen from afar long before we arrive. A specific fungus shapes freezing water into fine, silky ice strands. On dead wood in humid, winter forests, a specific biological presence shapes the freezing water into air ice. The ice does not form a crust, but is pushed out of the wood's pores in thin, separate filaments, each one a single, ancient crystal growing in a patient curve. This silent partnership between the fungus and the cold prevents the strands from crystallizing into a block, maintaining an eternal, distinct separation. Imagine a fallen branch on the forest floor, surrounded by deep black leaf litter. It looks like it is covered in a luxurious, bioluminescent wig of white silk. The strands are finer than human hair, weaving slightly in the invisible draft, a vast, fragile sculpture created by the embrace of rotten coal. The beauty is ephemeral, vanishing with the sun or touch. It is a reminder that even in decay, life and winter can collaborate to spin the most delicate and unexpected beauty, turning the old into a quiet canvas for the new. Frost flowers on sea ice bloom from supersaturated, salty vapor. Unlike the frost on a window, these delicate structures wick moisture from the new ice surface, creating a highly saline, briny structure that defies the surrounding dryness. The formation is a silent, ancient negotiation between the freezing ocean and the frigid air, occurring only in the calmest conditions. The crystals grow in a patient, fern-like rhythm, building a temporary garden on the crust of the deep. Picture a vast, frozen ocean under the polar night, stretching endlessly into the deep black. On the surface, millions of tiny, white blossoms stand about an inch tall, glowing with a faint, bioluminescent sheen against the darkness. They are fragile, holding the salt of the sea in a crystal embrace. They drift nowhere, anchored to the subterranean cold of the ice sheet. It is a reminder that even in the most desolate and uninhabitable voids, nature insists on creating complex, transient beauty that flourishes in the quiet silence. An anhydro is a water bubble trapped inside a crystal. This ancient pocket of fluid was captured millions of years ago during the crystal's rapid growth, sealed forever within the silica walls. It is a silent time capsule, preserving a drop of the subterranean primordial soup from which the mineral formed. The water remains liquid, maintaining its eternal rhythm of movement within the static embrace of the quartz. It has been invisible to the world for eons, protected by the hard, patient shell of the stone. Imagine holding a polished piece of clear quartz up to a flickering light. As you tilt it, a tiny air bubble glides slowly through a hidden chamber of water, a vast and quiet movement inside the solid rock. The bubble travels back and forth, a bioluminescent spark of life in the deep black of the stone's interior. It is a humbling reminder that the fluid essence of the past can be preserved eternally, waiting patiently to be witnessed within the rigid structures of the present. Bullet rosettes are clusters of ice columns radiating from a center. They form in a high, cold atmosphere where the temperature favors the growth of prisms rather than plates. Multiple crystals nucleate on a single frozen rocklet, shooting outward in a starburst pattern, following an eternal geometric rhythm. Each arm is a hexagonal column, often hollow, striving to embrace the vast space around it. The growth is rapid and silent, a subterranean architectural explosion happening miles above the earth. Picture one of these complex clusters tumbling through the invisible air currents. It looks like a crystalline flower or starburst catching the bioluminescent moonlight on its many facets. The columns point in all directions, guarding the center against the deep black of the sky. As they drift downward, they make electron or break apart. It is a reminder that even when we start from the same central point, our paths can diverge beautifully, creating a vast and unified structure that faces every direction with quiet strength. Ice wedges form when extreme cold cracks the frozen ground. In the ancient tundra, the earth contracts and splits in the winter, opening thin, invisible fissures. When spring comes, meltwater fills these veins and freezes, expanding the crack in a patient, subterranean cycle that repeats for centuries. This process creates a vast network of vertical ice sheets that push the soil up into geometric polygons. The growth is a silent, eternal rhythm of thermal contraction and expansion. Imagine flying over the Arctic landscape, seeing the ground patterned with perfect hexagons and squares, outlined by the ridges of the ice below. The ice itself is pure and massive, glowing with a deep bioluminescent blue where it is exposed. It anchors the landscape in a frozen embrace. It is a humbling reminder that the invisible cycles of temperature can impose a rigorous, eternal geometry upon the chaotic earth, creating a vast order that is only visible from a distance. Whirlpool forms when supercooled water droplets freeze onto a snowflake. As the delicate crystal falls through a cloud of invisible mist, the droplets collide and freeze instantly upon contact, creating a coating of rime. This process, known as rim, encases the ancient, hexagonal structure in a lumpy, white armor, blurring its sharp edges. The snowflake loses its delicate definition but gains mass, falling faster in a silent, patient rhythm. The result is a soft, opaque pellet, a distinct form of precipitation that acts as a subterranean insulation for the ground. Picture a shower of these white spheres bouncing softly on the frozen earth, like tiny styrofoam balls. They cover the deep black of the soil in a vast, porous blanket. Each pellet holds the ghost of a star within its dense embrace, shining with a dull, bioluminescent whiteness. It is a reminder that sometimes we must sacrifice our delicate, external perfection and embrace a rougher, heavier form to survive the descent and protect what lies beneath. Such systems allow metal crystals to deform plastically without breaking apart. This ancient mechanism permits layers of atoms to slide over one another along specific planes, preserving the integrity of the material while changing its shape. The movement is silent and invisible, occurring deep within the lattice where the atomic bonds break and reform in a continuous, flowing rhythm. We rarely think of metal as fluid, yet on this scale, it drifts like a slow, patient glacier. Imagine bending a paperclip. Internally, billions of atoms are gliding past their neighbors in a vast, subterranean migration. They move along the path of least resistance, maintaining their eternal embrace even as their positions shift. The lattice does not shatter, it accommodates. It is a humbling reminder that true strength is not found in rigidity, but in the capacity to yield, adapt, and find a new balance without losing one's fundamental connection to the whole. Eflarcenus creates a white, crystalline bloom on the surface of stone or brick. This ancient process occurs when water-containing dissolved salts migrates through a porous material and then evaporates, leaving the minerals behind. It is a quiet, subterranean journey of moisture moving from the damp interior to the dry air. The salts crystallize in the open, forming delicate, powdery structures that look like a sudden, silent snowfall. Picture an old, red brick wall on the detached side. On its surface, a garden of white, needle-like crystals grows, glowing with a faint, bioluminescent pallor against the deep black of the shadowed masonry. The crystals are fragile, born from the slow drift of water through stone. They are the visible evidence of hidden waters. It is a reminder that what is buried deep within the substance of things will eventually surface, transforming the exterior in a patient, eternal revelation of what was carried inside. Tall and merging fractures of volcanic rock into perfect, hexagonal pillars. As thick lava flows cool and contract, the rock cracks in a precise, ancient geometric pattern to relieve the internal stress. This process turns a chaotic, molten flood into a vast, orderly colonnade of stone following a strict, silent rhythm of shrinkage. The columns stand vertically, packed together in an eternal embrace, creating a natural pavement that looks constructed by giants. Imagine standing at the foot of a dark basalt cliff. The rock is not random but organized in 200s of six-sided towers rising into the mist. They are black and imposing, yet their geometry is as delicate as a snowflake. The cooling was slow and patient, allowing the stress to resolve into perfect order. It is a humbling reminder that even the most fiery and chaotic beginnings can cool into a structure of profound, quiet, and lasting stability. Then chorus are large, distinct crystals embedded within a fine-grained rock matrix. These ancient giants formed slowly in a deep, subterranean magma chamber, growing large and perfect over thousands of years before the magma erupted and cooled quickly around them. They are time travelers, suspended in a stone snapshot of two different cooling rates. The contrast creates a texture known as porphyry. Imagine holding a smooth river stone that is dark gray, that filled with large, rectangular white feldspar crystals. These bright inclusions shine with a bioluminescent clarity against the deep black of the surrounding rock. They float in the stone lonely but preserved in a tight embrace. They drifted in the melt before being frozen in place. It is a reminder that we all carry the distinct, developed parts of our past histories with us, suspended eternally within the new, finer-grained context of our present reality. Elgu writes are hollow glass tubes formed when lightning strikes sand. This ancient event fuses the silica grains instantly, capturing the path of the electrical discharge in a permanent, brittle structure. It is a violent, vast energy transformed into a silent, eternal form in a fraction of a second. The heat vaporizes the sand in the center, leaving a rough tubular void. Imagine walking on a dune after a storm. You find a rough, root-like structure sticking out of the ground, made of fused glass. Inside it is smooth and glassy, a record of the lightning's flash frozen in the deep black of the earth. It glows with a dull, bioluminescent memory of the heat. The chaos of the storm has been calcified into a patient, fragile monument. It is a reminder that even the most fleeting and powerful flashes of energy can leave a permanent, structured legacy if the ground is ready to receive it. Self-organizing chemical waves create concentric patterns within porous rocks. This ancient geological rhythm occurs when mineral-rich fluids drift through the subterranean pores of a stone, precipitating an invisible, repeating bands of color and silica. It is a silent oscillation of chemistry, where diffusion and saturation embrace to create a fixed, eternal geometry without any external template. The process is patient, taking thousands of years to paint the interior of the rock in a quiet, rhythmic sequence known as Lycian rings. Picture a sliced agate held up against the deep black of a vast cavern. The concentric rings glow with a faint, bioluminescent orange gray, rippling outward like frozen sound waves in water. Each band is a physical record of a specific moment of chemical balance preserved forever in the hard silica. The stone holds a vast, internal map of its own formation, a secret kept in the dark. It is a reminder that even in the seemingly solid and static, there is a pulse of ancient, rhythmic creation that leaves a beautiful, lasting echo. crystal formations in arid deserts incorporates and grains into their structure. These ancient, flower-like clusters of gypsum or bar-white tea form in the silent, dry basins where shallow, saline water evaporates over centuries. As the crystals grow, they patient and quiet embrace the surrounding sand, locking the vast landscape itself into their eternal mass. The result is a stone blossom, harder than the wind that uncovers it, existing in a subterranean harmony with the dust. Imagine a moonlit dune field, the deep black shadow stretching across the sand. Half buried in the ground lies a cluster of these sharp, circular plates, glowing with a dry, bioluminescent pale beige. They look like roses turned to stone, surviving where nothing else can grow. The geometry is invisible until the wind reveals it to the open air. It is a humbling reminder that beauty can flourish in the most barren places by integrating the very harshness of the environment into a vast, eternal form of resilience. Permanently frozen ground preserves ancient landscapes beneath the living surface. This vast, subterranean layer of ice and soil, known as permafrost, has remained in a silent, patient embrace for millennia, locking away carbon and history in a frozen suspension. The ice acts as an eternal cement, holding the loose earth in a rock-hard grip that defies the drift of seasons above. It is a quiet, invisible archive of the world that was waiting in the dark. Picture a cliff face where the earth has sheared away, revealing the dark, frozen soil. Veins of pure, clear ice run through it like bioluminescent lightning against the deep black of the peak. Roots and ancient plant matter are suspended in the clear walls, waiting in a long, cold sleep. The cold is absolute and preserving. It is a reminder that the stability of our current ground often rests upon a vast, cold, and silent history that remains firm only as long as it is undisturbed. Meteoric impacts create a rare form of diamond with a hexagonal mass. This ancient transformation occurs in the fraction of a second when a meteorite strikes graphite-rich rock, delivering a vast, invisible shockwave of pressure. The carbon atoms are forced instantly from their layer drift into a hexagonal embrace, bypassing the patient cubic growth of normal diamonds to create something harder and rarer called monstability. It is a silent testament to cosmic violence turned into eternal structure. Imagine the aftermath of a starfall, the crater cooling in the deep black of the night. Microscopic crystals are scattered in the debris, glowing with a faint, bioluminescent hardness that exceeds that of any earthly gem. They are born of sudden, subterranean fire, but exist now in cold silence. It is a humbling reminder that the most profound strength and unique structures are often forged not by slow growth, but by the sudden, vast impact of forces beyond our control. Tiny radioactive inclusions create colored spheres within transparent mineral crystals. These ancient, microscopic halos form around grains of zircon trapped inside mica or quartz caused by the silent, invisible emission of alpha particles over millions of years. The radiation damages the crystal lattice in a precise spherical rhythm, darkening the mineral in a patient, eternal sphere of influence known as a PLE halo. It is a subterranean clock ticking in the dark. Picture looking through a thin sheet of clear mica against a backlight. You see small, perfect dreams of dark, smoky color, glowing with a strange, bioluminescent intensity against the transparency. Each ring marks the limit of an atomic particle's drift. The center is a tiny speck, yet its influence is vast relative to its size. It is a reminder that even the smallest, invisible sources of energy can, given enough time, leave a vast, permanent, and beautiful mark on the world around them. Pancake ice forms circular pads with raised rims due to wave action. This ancient cycle begins when a layer of grease ice is disturbed by the ocean swell, preventing a solid sheet from forming. The crystals consolidate into plates that bump against each other in a quiet, patient rhythm, rounding their edges and pushing up a ridge of slush. Imagine a vast, dark ocean stretching into the night, covered in thousands of these white, floating lilies. They drift on the swell, glowing with a ghostly, bioluminescent pale light against the deep black water. The movement is constant but silent, a soft collision of soft forms. They seek to embrace into a solid field but are kept separate by the energy of the waves. The water between them is ink black and cold. It is a humbling reminder that our boundaries are often defined by our collisions with others, and that a vast, eternal unity sometimes requires a patient acceptance of the turbulence that keeps us distinct. Zircon crystals are the oldest known materials found on the Earth's crust. These ancient microscopic time capsules float in cooling magma, locking uranium atoms into their eternal mass while rejecting lead. This subterranean selection allows them to function as a silent, invisible clock, ticking away the eons through radioactive decay. Imagine a single, tiny grain of zircon surviving the destruction of mountains and the recycling of continents. It sits in a riverbed, unnoticed, holding a bioluminescent spark of order within its structure against the deep black of chaotic sediment. Its growth was a quiet, patient event billions of years ago. It has withstood vast pressures and temperatures, refusing to lose its internal rhythm. The crystal is an embrace of memory. It is a reminder that the truest things are often the smallest and most resilient, carrying the vast, eternal history of the world in a quiet, unbreakable heart. Cryos ISMS are sudden, explosive cracks in frozen soil caused by rapid cooling. This ancient phenomenon, also known as an ice quake, occurs when the ground contracts faster than the material can withstand, snapping in a silent, invisible release of vast tension. The earth splits open with a booming sound that shatters the quiet of the winter night. Imagine a snow-covered forest standing perfectly still in the deep black darkness. The temperature drops relentlessly, a patient, heavy force. Suddenly, the ground shudders and a fissure opens beneath the snow, a release of subterranean stress. The silence rushes back in, but the hidden fracture remains. The energy was stored in an eternal, frozen embrace until it could no longer hold. This reminds us that even the most grounded and solid things act under vast, invisible pressures, and that a sudden break is often just the final, loud expression of a long, quiet endurance. Glacier mice are rare colonies of moss that roll slowly across polar ice. These ancient biological oddities form on the surface of glaciers, where the patient wind and melting ice cause them to rotate, ensuring all sides receive sunlight. They do not root, they drift in a quiet, eternal migration. Imagine a vast field of blue-white ice, cold and sterile, populated by these soft, green spheres. They look like living stones, warm to the touch, glowing with a vibrant, bioluminescent green against the deep black of the cryo-cone night holes. They move in a herd-like rhythm, synchronized by the sun and the slope. They survive by never staying still, rolling to avoid the cold embrace of the ice. It is a humbling reminder that survival sometimes demands that we let go of our roots and keep moving, trusting the vast, invisible forces of our environment to turn us toward the light. A snow bridge spans a crevasse with a deceptive, fragile arch of wind-blown powder. This ancient formation builds out from the lip of the void, crystal by crystal, created by the patient, silent work of the blizzard. The wind packs the snow into a cohesive structure that looks solid but hangs over a vast, invisible emptiness. Imagine walking on a glacier where the surface seems unbroken white. Beneath your feet, a thin layer of snow embraces the gap over a subterranean drop of hundreds of feet into the deep black ice. The bridge holds its own weight through a delicate, eternal tension. It glows with a faint, bioluminescent translucent, hiding the danger below. The formation is a quiet trap or a path, depending on its thickness. It is a reminder that the path forward often relies on invisible, fragile connections, and that we must walk with a patient, light tread when crossing the vast unknowns of our lives. Dendritic inclusions form plant-like patterns within the heart of translucent stones. This ancient mineral mimicry occurs when manganese or iron oxides drift into the tiny fractures of a forming agate, crystallizing in a branching, fern-like rhythm. It is not a fossil of a plant, but a silent, inorganic imitation of life, growing patiently through the subterranean silica. Imagine holding a polished slice of moss agate, a window into a foggy, vast landscape. Suspended in the milky, bioluminescent white of the stone are delicate, deep black filaments that look like a frozen for a store spreading moss. The mineral branches are locked in an eternal, quiet suspension, captured in the stone's cooling embrace. There's no wind to move them, only the stillness of the rock. It is a humbling reminder that the laws of growth and branching are universal, connecting the invisible veins of the earth to the patterns of the living world in a shared, ancient design. Striped icebergs reveal the complex, layered history of their parent glacier. These ancient floating mountains are not just white, but banded with stripes of different colors, each representing a specific, silent era of formation. Blue stripes are created by meltwater that Ray froze instantly without bubbles. Green stripes contain ancient, invisible organic matter picked up from the subterranean shelf. The patterns follow an eternal sedimentary rhythm. Imagine drifting past a massive wall of ice in the quiet polar sea. It looks like a giant, painted canvas with bold ribbons of bioluminescent teal and indigo running through the vast white cliffs against the deep black of the water. Each stripe is a patient record of a season long past. The iceberg carries its memories as it drifts to its end. It is a reminder that we are all composites of our varied experiences, visible layers of clarity and darkness held together in a single vast and cohesive form. Sun cups are concave hollows that form on the surface of high-altitude snowfields. This ancient texture arises when the sun focuses its energy on a random depression, melting it faster than the surrounding ridges in a self-reinforcing, silent process. The entire snow surface organizes itself into a vast, honeycomb pattern of shallow bowls, following a patient thermodynamic rhythm. Imagine walking across a glacier at sunset, where the ground is a sea of these hexagonal cups. The ridges catch the last light, glowing bioluminescent light, while the centers of the cups dip into invisible, quiet shadow. The pattern extends to the horizon, a field of eternal white craters sculpted by the light. The snow holds the sun's embrace in every hollow. It is a humbling reminder that even the softest, most uniform surfaces can be sculpted by the gentle, persistent touch of light into a complex, vast, and ordered landscape. Thin quartz crystals are defined by a milky white thread running through their center. This ancient line, or faden, is the scar of a break that happened while the crystal was growing in a subterranean fissure. The crystal broke, but the pieces remain in an embrace, healing across the gap with rapid, patient growth that trapped tiny, invisible liquid inclusions. This created the white thread, a silent axis around which the rest of the clear crystal continued to form. Imagine a flat, tabular crystal, perfectly clear except for this ghostly, bioluminescent spine visible against a deep black background. The scar is not a flaw, but the anchor of its stability, the root of its eternal shape. It grew because it was broken. It is a reminder that our deepest wounds often become the central, quiet axis of our strength, guiding our future growth in a vast and resilient way. Rock glaciers consist of massive ice cores buried beneath thick layers of talus. Unlike a white glacier, this ancient river of ice is completely hidden, shielded from the sun by a blanket of rock that allows it to survive in warmer climates. The movement is invisible and slow, a vast, subterranean creep of ice and stone flowing together in a quiet, heavy rhythm. Imagine standing in a high, gray valley. The floor looks like a chaotic pile of scree, but if you watch patiently for years, the entire landscape is drifting downhill. The ice is the eternal secret engine driving the mountain's shape from below. The rocks on top shift silently, riding the frozen back of the bioluminescent ice hidden deep within. It is a humbling reminder that the most powerful forces moving our world are often deeply buried, working quietly and relentlessly beneath a rough, unassuming surface. Pegmatites contain the largest crystals on Earth due to water-rich magma. This ancient fluid environment allows ions to drift freely and patiently over vast distances before locking into an eternal lattice embrace. The cooling is incredibly slow, a silent, subterranean slumber that lasts for eons, permitting single crystals to grow to the size of trees. Imagine a hidden chamber deep in the crust, where enormous beams of quartz and tourmaline crisscross the dark void. They glow with a faint, bioluminescent hum against the deep black of the surrounding rock walls. The silence here is absolute, a heavy, quiet weight that protects the invisible growth of these giants. The structure is perfect, undisturbed by the rush of the surface world. It is a humbling reminder that when given vast space and eternal time, even the smallest potential can expand into a form of monumental and lasting grandeur. Needle ice grows from the soil when the air is freezing, but the ground remains unfrozen. This ancient hydraulic action draws invisible moisture from the Earth's pores, pushing it upward to freeze in thin, silent columns that lift the surface debris. The growth is a vertical drift, a patient, collective heaving of the soil by millions of tiny, transparent pillars. Picture a chilly morning where the bare ground is covered in these fragile, glass-like filaments. They stand together in a tight, quiet embrace, holding up pebbles and leaves as if offering them to the sky. The ice catches the dawn light, creating a low, bioluminescent carpet against the deep black of the mud below. The crystals are ephemeral, destined to melt, yet their structure is rigorous. It is a reminder that the most delicate, subterranean forces are capable of shouldering heavy burdens, rising quietly to change the landscape from beneath. Trapite shea emeralds exhibit a rare, six-spoked wool pattern made of dark carbon impurities. This ancient geometry forms when the crystal growth slows, allowing the subterranean black shale to settle into the invisible junctions between the growth sectors. The gem grows in a silent, pulsing rhythm, alternating between pure green gem and dark inclusion, yet maintaining its eternal hexagonal symmetry. Imagine looking into the deep green heart of the stone. 8 perfect, deep black stars suspended within, a static wheel that will never turn. The green sections glow with a vibrant bioluminescent clarity, held in the embrace of the dark spokes. The pattern is fixed and vastly precise, a record of the crystal's struggle and triumph. It is a humbling reminder that our interruptions and shadows can be integrated into a beautiful, quiet, and balanced whole, creating a pattern more unique than perfection alone. Flowstone forms when mineral-rich water flows constantly down the walls of a cave. Unlike the dripping of stalactites, this ancient process is a continuous, silent sheet of deposition, creating smooth, undulating draperies of calcite that look like frozen waterfalls. The layers accumulate in a patient, eternal rhythm, thickening by fractions of a millimeter over centuries. Imagine a vast, subterranean cavern where the walls appear soft and folded, like wet fabric turned to stone. The surface glistens with a wet, bioluminescent sheen against the deep black shadows of the cave floor. The water drifts over the rock in an invisible film, leaving behind its burden of stone in a gentle embrace. The rock remembers the flow of the water forever. It is a reminder that persistence and softness can cover the hardest surfaces in beauty, transforming the rough and jagged into something smooth, quiet, and unified. The Schiller effect is a metallic, glittering flash produced by aligned inclusions within a mineral. This ancient optical phenomenon occurs in sunstone when millions of tiny, invisible copper or hematite platelets form in a parallel embrace within the crystal lattice. They lie in wait, silent and dark, until the light hits them at the perfect angle. Then they reflect in unison a vast collective signal. Imagine a dull orange stone turning in the light. Suddenly a wave of bioluminescent gold fire sweeps across its surface, illuminating the quiet interior. The sparkle is not on the surface, but comes from the subterranean depths of the gem. The platelets follow the eternal rhythm of the crystal structure. It is a humbling reminder that we all possess hidden, internal facets that remain dark until the right light reveals our capacity for a vast, brilliant, and unified reflection. Superionic ice exists at extreme pressures and temperatures where water becomes both solid and liquid simultaneously. This ancient state of matter, found deep within the mantles of giant planets, features a stable oxygen lattice while hydrogen ions drift freely like a fluid. It is a silent, subterranean paradox, a vast material that is hot, black, and incredibly dense. Imagine the core of a distant planet, where the crushing weight creates this invisible, eternal form of water. The ice is not golden white, but radiates a dark bioluminescent heat against the deep black of the crushed interior. The atoms are locked in a heavy structural embrace, yet the ions flow with a quiet, liquid rhythm. It is a reminder that under the greatest pressures of existence, the rigid boundaries of our nature can transform, maintaining a solid, unbreakable core while allowing for a fluid, patient, and energetic freedom within. Heliocytites are rare cave formations that defy gravity by twisting and curling erratic shapes. Unlike vertical stalactites, these ancient calcite crystals are guided by invisible capillary forces and hydrostatic pressure rather than gravity, growing in a silent, spiraling rhythm. The water flows through a microscopic central channel, depositing minerals in a patient, wandering path that can go sideways or even upward. Imagine a vast, subterranean chamber filled with these delicate, white, worm-like structures growing from the walls. They look like frozen roots or antlers, glowing bioluminescent white against the deep black rock. They twist and turn in a slow, eternal dance, refusing to bow to the downward drift of the earth. It is a humbling reminder that even in a world governed by heavy, downward laws, there is always a way to grow freely and quietly in one's own unique, gravity-defying direction. Ametrine is a distinct quartz variety that contains sectors of both purple, amethyst, and orange green within a single crystal. This ancient duality occurs due to a specific temperature gradient during the crystal's subterranean growth, causing iron ions to oxidize differently within the same vast, eternal mass. The transition is not a flaw, but a silent, patient record of changing thermal conditions. Thick cut gemstone held to the light, divided perfectly into zones of violet and gold. The colors embraced the center, glowing with a soft, bioluminescent harmony against the deep black velvet. The crystal did not choose one path. It integrated the heat and the cold into a single quiet rhythm. It is a reminder that we do not have to be just one thing. We can hold conflicting states within us, fusing them into a vast, cohesive, and beautiful whole. Cave pearls are spherical formations of calcite that form in shallow, agitated subterranean pools. Like an oyster pearl, layers of mineral patiently coat a grain of sand, driven by the rhythm of dripping water that keeps the pearl constantly turning so it cannot stick to the floor. This ancient rotation ensures a perfect, polished sphere. Imagine a nest of these marble-sized stones in a dark, subterranean basin. The water ripples silently, glowing with a faint bioluminescent reflection from the calcite. The pearls are smooth and white, rolling gently in their limestone pockets, polished by the eternal drift of the water drops. They are the result of constant motion in the mineral's embrace. It is a reminder that the agitations and movements of our lives are often the very forces that polish us, smoothing our rough edges into a form of vast, quiet, and perfect symmetry. Garnet crystals typically grow in the shape of a rhombic dodecahedron, a 12-sided solid. This ancient geometry is a natural result of the garnet's cubic molecular structure, trying to embrace the vast space within a metamorphic rock. The faces are diamond-shaped, fitting together in a silent, eternal puzzle without gaps. Imagine a dark schist rock studded with these perfect deep red crystals. They emerge from the subterranean heat, growing patiently by pushing the surrounding rock aside. The faces catch the light, revealing a deep, bioluminescent crimson fire within the deep black stone. The crystal is hardened, adds a heavy anchor in the drift of geological change. It follows a strict, quiet rhythm of angles. It is a reminder that true strength often manifests as a complex, multifaceted adaptability, presenting a solid, perfect face to every angle of the surrounding pressure. Strain hardening occurs when a metal becomes stronger as it is deformed. This ancient metallurgical truth relies on the invisible movement of dislocations within the crystal lattice, which eventually tangle and block each other, halting further slip. The material loses its ability to flow and locks into a rigid, silent strength. Imagine a copper wire being bent back and forth in the quiet of a workshop. With each bend, the atoms are forced into a tighter subterranean embrace, resisting the motion. The metal warms slightly, releasing a faint, bioluminescent infrared heat against the deep black of the cool air. The structure becomes vastly more resistant, trading its flexibility for an eternal, unyielding hardness. It flows no more, having found its limit. It is a humbling reminder that stress and struggle do not always break us. Often, they are the very forces that forge our patient, malleable nature into a form of quiet, unbreakable resolve. Tectids are natural glass objects formed by the impact of large meteorites. This ancient cataclysm creates a vast splash of molten terrestrial rock that is ejected into the upper atmosphere, where it cools rapidly into an eternal, aerodynamic shape before falling back to Earth. The process is a violent, silent transformation of soil into gem-like glass. Imagine a rain of black, glossy teardrops falling from the deep black of the night sky, cooling in the subterranean cold of space before landing. They lie scattered in the desert, catching the starlight with a dark, bioluminescent gleam. They are the quiet daughters of a chaotic union between sky and earth. They drift through time, preserved by their glassy embrace. It is a reminder that even the most destructive impacts can create something of smooth, patient, and enduring beauty, transforming the rough earth into a vast, invisible memory of the event. Diagenesis is the ancient process that turns loose sediment into solid sedimentary rock. This patient transformation occurs under low temperature and pressure, where groundwater slowly cements the grains together in a silent, subterranean chemical rhythm. The loose sand or mud loses its porosity, locking into an eternal stone embrace. Imagine a layer of sand on an ancient seabed, slowly buried under vast weights of new earth. The water drifts through the pores, leaving behind microscopic crystals of calcite or silica that act as invisible glue. The darkness is absolute, a deep black void where time moves at a quiet geological pace. The grains sparkle one last time with a bioluminescent memory of the sun before becoming rock. It is a humbling reminder that with enough time and pressure, the disparate and shifting sands of our lives can be cemented into a foundation of vast, eternal, and unified strength. SPHRU lights are spherical bodies of radiating crystals that form within glassy volcanic rocks. This ancient growth happens when the lava cools too quickly to crystallize fully, but tiny, invisible seeds manage to initiate a silent, rapid growth in all directions. The result is a ball of fiber-like crystals frozen in the vast, obsidian glass. Imagine breaking open a black, volcanic stone to reveal these white, snowflake-like spots scattered throughout the deep black matrix. They look like bioluminescent stars trapped in a dark sky. Each one grew in a patient, spherical rhythm, striving to organize the chaos of the glass into an eternal order. They are distinct from the surrounding flow, held in a static embrace. It is a reminder that even in a world that has cooled into a hard, chaotic glass, there are centers of quiet, radiating order that persist, preserving the ancient drive towards structure. Hourglass zoning is a distinctive pattern of crystal growth where impurities are concentrated in specific sectors. This ancient visual phenomenon creates a dark, hourglass shape within the transparent body of the crystal, reflecting a subterranean difference in how the faces absorb the surrounding elements. The growth followed a patient, silent rhythm, selectively entrapping material. Imagine holding a clear selenite crystal up to the moonlight. Inside, a perfect, deep black hourglass figure floats, suspended in the vast clarity of the mineral. The surrounding crystal glows with a bioluminescent pallor, while the dark zones hold the memory of the earth. The shape is fixed, an eternal record of time and chemistry held in a quiet embrace. It does not drift, it waits. It is a humbling reminder that we carry the sands of time within us, not as a burden, but as an integral, invisible part of our beautiful, transparent structure. Fresh snow absorbs sound waves, creating a profound acoustic dampening effect. This ancient silence occurs because the flakes are loosely packed, leaving vast, invisible pockets of air that trap noise rather than reflecting it. The landscape enters a quiet, subterranean slumber, muffled by the soft embrace of the crystals. The usual rhythm of the world is paused. Picture walking into a deep forest immediately after a heavy snowfall. The air is still and heavy, and your footsteps make no sound in the deep black of the shadows. The trees stand like patient sentinels, covered in bioluminescent white, and even the wind seems to hold its breath. The silence is not empty, it is a physical weight, a suppression of chaos. It is a humbling reminder that true peace often requires a soft, vast buffer to absorb the noise of existence, creating a quiet sanctuary where we can finally hear ourselves think. The Cave of the Crystals contains the largest natural crystals ever found. These ancient gypsum beams grew in a hot, subterranean chamber filled with mineral-rich water that remained at a stable temperature for 500,000 years. The growth was incredibly patient, following a slow, silent rhythm that allowed the pillars to span the entire vast cavern. Imagine standing in the sweltering, humid cathedral deep underground. Giant translucent swords of selenite cross the darkness, glowing with a faint bioluminescent pearl sense against the deep black of the cave walls. They are sharp and heavy, locking the space in an eternal embrace of geometric perfection. The water is gone now, but the crystals remain, suspended in their invisible history. It is a reminder that if we maintain a stable, patient environment and allow for slow, quiet growth, we can achieve heights of magnitude and beauty that seem impossible to the world above. Living organisms can grow crystals to navigate the magnetic fields of the earth. These ancient, microscopic chains of magnetite from inside bacteria and birds acting as an invisible, subterranean compass. The crystals align perfectly with the planet's magnetic lines, creating a silent, internal rhythm that guides the creatures drift through the world. The growth is biological, yet strictly geometric, an embrace of the mineral world by the living. Picture a tiny bacterium swimming through the deep black of a sediment layer. Inside it, a row of perfect, dark cubic crystals glows with a faint, bioluminescent purpose, pulling it gently toward the north. It never sees the stars, yet it knows the way, guided by the eternal pull of the earth. It is a humbling reminder that we often possess an internal, quiet direction built from the very dust of the earth that can guide us through the vast unknowns if we learn to trust it. Ice 7 is a dense, cubic form of ice that exists only under extreme pressure. Unlike the hexagonal snow we know, this ancient structure forms when liquid water is crushed by planetary forces, locking the atoms into a vast, efficient cubic embrace. The molecules lose their ability to drift, forced into a patient, eternal grid that is denser than water itself. Imagine the deep, subterranean ocean of a super-Earth planet. The bottom is not rock, but a floor of this hot, hard ice, darkened immense. It glows with a strange, bioluminescent heat in the crushing deep black. The structure is invisible to us on the surface, yet it holds the ocean up. It creates a quiet, immovable foundation. It is a reminder that under the greatest weights and most impossible pressures, our nature does not have to break. It can transform into something denser, stronger, and more eternally stable. When rain falls on a salt flat, it creates the world's largest natural mirror. The water dissolves the surface layer of the ancient salt crust, smoothing out every invisible imperfection into a vast liquid plain. The horizon vanishes and the sky embraces the earth in a silent, perfect reflection. The water is shallow, barely covering the subterranean white crystals, yet the effect is infinite. Picture standing in the center of this endless expanse of twilight. The stars above are perfectly matched by the stars below, creating a bioluminescent sphere of space. You drift through the center of the universe, surrounded by deep blackened starlight. The rhythm of the earth has stopped. It is a humbling reminder that when we smooth our surfaces and become perfectly still, we become capable of reflecting the vast, eternal beauty of the heavens, dissolving the boundary between what is above and what is below. Ice after crystal forms when a secondary crystal grows over the termination of an older existing stem. This ancient geological restart occurs when the chemical conditions in the subterranean cavity change, bringing a new wave of silica-rich fluid to embrace the original point. The new growth catches the old, creating a distinct, expanded head on a narrower shaft, following a silent, patient architectural plan. Imagine a deep, vast pocket in the rock where a clear quartz point has stood in the dark for eons. Suddenly a new phase of growth begins and a royal bioluminescent cap slowly forms over the tip, sealing the ancient history inside. The two generations are fused in an eternal, quiet union, different in age but identical in substance. It is a humbling reminder that we can always begin again, building a larger, more vast self upon the patient, solid foundations of who we used to be. Sun dogs are luminous spots of light that appear on either side of the sun, caused by ice crystals. This ancient atmospheric phenomenon requires the air to be filled with millions of hexagonal plate crystals, all drifting with their flat faces parallel to the ground in a silent, vast alignment. They act as invisible prisms, bending the light into a specific angle. Picture standing on a frozen plain under a pale, cold sky. The sun is low and flanking it are the ghostly, bioluminescent companions, rainbows condensed into bright pools of light against the deep black of space. The air is absolutely quiet, yet the sky is filled with this eternal optical geometry. The crystals are patient, aligning themselves with gravity to paint the sky. It is a reminder that when we align ourselves with the vast, invisible laws of nature, we become capable of reflecting the light in ways that magnify and multiply its presence. Nacre, or mother of pearl, is a composite material produced by some mollusks to line their inner shells. This ancient biocrystal is composed of microscopic, hexagonal platelets of aragonite arranged in a continuous, silent brick and mortar pattern. The layers are invisible to the naked eye, but their regular spacing interferes with light to create iridescence. Imagine the interior of a dark-shelled, deep subterranean in the ocean. Layer by patient layer, the creature lays down these mineral bricks in a quiet, eternal rhythm. The surface glows with a shifting, bioluminescent oil slick sheet of pinks and greens against the deep black of the sea depth. The strength comes from the vast repetition of tiny parts. The result is a smooth, protective embrace. It is a humbling reminder that the strongest and most beautiful defenses are built quietly, layer by microscopic layer, over a lifetime of patient and soft resilience. Shore ice expands laterally when the temperature rises, pushing vast sheets of ice onto the land. This ancient movement, known as an ice shelf, is driven by the thermal expansion of the floating ice sheet, which needs more room as it warms. It is a silent, unstoppable force that moves with a vast, glacial rhythm. Imagine a moonlit lake where the ice seems still. Yet, the edge, a massive, white sheet is slowly sliding up the bank, plowing through the earth in a quiet, subterranean grind. The ice glows bioluminescent blue in the night, a creeping wall of cold. The movement is patient but immense, an eternal reminder of the power stored in the molecular lattice. The ice leaves the water to embrace the shore. It is a reminder that even in a frozen state, we possess the capacity for vast movement and expansion, capable of crossing boundaries through the slow, silent accumulation of thermal energy. Iris quartz is a crystal that contains thin, internal fractures that generate rainbows. This ancient optical effect is caused by the interference of light waves reflecting off the microscopic, air-filled gap fractures a silent wound in the stone, yet it transforms the light into a vast spectrum of color. Imagine a clear crystal held in the sun. Deep inside, a flat, invisible plane suddenly flashes with a neon, bioluminescent magenta and gold as you turn it against the deep black background. The break has become a prism. The crystal remains whole, holding the fracture in a patient, eternal embrace. The flaw has become the source of its beauty, following a quiet optical rhythm. It is a humbling reminder that our internal breaks and scars, when held in the right light, are often the places where we reflect the most vibrant and vast spectrum of our true colors. Whitman's 10 patterns are complex, interlocking metallic structures found only in iron meteorites. This ancient geometry forms when iron and nickel alloys cool extremely slowly within the core of a planetary body, losing heat at a rate of just a few degrees every million years. This vast, patient temescal allows the metal crystals to separate and grow into long, intersecting plates that are invisible until the meteorite is cut and etched with acid. The pattern is a silent record of cosmic history. Imagine holding a slice of a meteorite, a cold, heavy slab of the universe. The surface reveals a perfect, cross-hatched lattice of silver and gray, shimmering with a metallic, bioluminescent luster against the deep black of the crust. The crisscrossing lines follow an eternal, strict octo-he-dato rhythm. It is a humbling reminder that true, unforgettable character is created not by the heat of the moment, but by the quiet, eternal cooling of the soul over eons of subterranean silence. Travertine terraces form when geothermal water surfaces in precipitate limestone. This ancient process builds natural staircases of white stone, created as the hot, mineral-rich water cools and degasses carbon dioxide in a quiet, patient release. The stone grows layer by microscopic layer, an eternal accumulation of sediment that embraces the slope. Imagine a mountainside covered in these cascading pools, steam rising silently into the cold air. The water in each basin is a startling bioluminescent turquoise, held by rings of snowy white rock. The water drifts gently over the edge of each step, depositing its burden of stone in a slow, rhythmic drift. The entire structure is a vast, frozen waterfall of rock. It is a reminder that even the softest flow of water, given enough time, can build vast, enduring foundations that hold beauty in a level, quiet equilibrium. Moulins are vertical shafts that channel meltwater from the surface of a glacier to the bedrock below. These ancient drains form when the water finds a weakness in the ice, spiraling down in a silent, powerful vortex that carves a smooth, cylindrical tube. They are the subterranean plumbing of the ice sheet, connecting the light of the surface to the vast, invisible darkness at the bottom. Imagine standing at the edge of one of these round, blue abysses. The sound of the falling water is a low, quiet roar, disappearing into the deep black depths. The walls of the shaft are polished smooth by the water's embrace, glowing with a deep, internal bioluminescent sapphire light. The water does not stop, it flows to the heart of the glacier. It is a reminder that we all have deep, internal channels that allow our surface emotions to drain away, feeding a vast, hidden river that moves us forward from deep within. Desert varnish is a dark, microscopic coating found on rocks in arid environments. This ancient patina is composed of clay minerals, manganese, and iron oxides, cemented together by the patient, invisible work of bacteria living on the stone surface. It goes incredibly slowly, darkening the rock over tens of thousands of years in a silent, eternal accumulation. Imagine a canyon wall bathed in the harsh noon sun. The rocks are not brown, but coated in a shiny, deep black or purple glaze that reflects the light. This varnish captures the quiet history of the desert climate, layer by atomic layer. It creates a vast, natural canvas used by ancients for petroglyphs. The coating is an embrace of the wind and dust. It is a humbling reminder that even in the harshest, driest conditions, life and time work together to coat the rough edges, of the world in a protective, shining, and eternal luster. Blue ice areas in Antarctica form where strong winds scour away the snow, revealing the dense ice below. These ancient patches are composed of ice that has been buried and compressed for hundreds of thousands of years, squeezing out every invisible air bubble until the ice absorbs all colors except blue. The surface is hard as concrete, a vast, subterranean archive exposed to the sky. Imagine walking on a solid, translucent floor. It is not white, but a deep, mesmerizing, bioluminescent cerulean stretching to the horizon. The ice is smooth and polished by the eternal wind, revealing the silent flow lines of the glacier's past movement. There is no drift here, only the bedrock of the ice sheet. It is a reminder that when the soft, protective layers are stripped away by the storms of life, what remains is our oldest, hardest, and most beautiful core, capable of bearing the vast weight of our history. Exotic crystals possess natural fiber optic properties due to their internal fiber structure. This ancient mineral, often called TV rock, is composed of thousands of parallel, capillary-like fibers that transmit light from one surface to the other with silent, invisible efficiency. The light travels down each hollow tube, preserving the image perfectly, a patient and vast optical trick of nature. Imagine a rough, unassuming white stone placed over a line of text in a dim room. The words appear to float on the top surface of the stone, projected silently through the subterranean density of the mineral. The stone glows with a faint, bioluminescent inner light against the deep black of the table. The fibers are locked in an eternal, parallel embrace, guiding the light without distortion. It is a reminder that true clarity comes not from being empty, but from being composed of countless, aligned channels that allow the light to pass through us with quiet, patient fidelity. Iron pyrite grows in perfect, sharp-edged cubes within sedimentary rock. Unlike the amorphous nuggets of gold it mimics, this ancient sulfide mineral adheres to a strict, subterranean geometric rhythm, forming boxes so precise they look manufactured. The growth is silent and patient, occurring deep underground where iron and sulfur atoms embrace in a cubic lattice. Imagine breaking open a dark, shale rock to reveal a cluster of shining, golden cubes embedded within. They reflect the light with a hard, metallic, bioluminescent glare against the matte, deep black of the matrix. The corners are razor sharp, defying the drift of organic chaos. The crystal has imposed its vast, eternal order upon the stone. It is a humbling reminder that nature possesses an inherent, quiet, and invisible mathematical language, capable of producing forms of absolute, rigid perfection in the absolute darkness of the earth. Finger rafting occurs when the thin sheets of sea ice collide. Instead of crushing each other, the ancient, elastic layers of nil as ice slide over and under one another in a repeating, interlocking pattern that resembles clasped fingers. This silent interaction happens on the vast, calm surface of the polar ocean, driven by the quiet drift of the wind. Imagine looking down at the dark water, where a zipper-like pattern of alternating light and dark rectangles forms an invisible line before your eyes. The submerged fingers appear as deep black, while the raised fingers catch the moonlight with a bioluminescent white glow. The sheets embrace in a patient, calculated friction. It is a reminder that when we meet an opposing force, the most enduring solution is often not to crash and break, but to find a quiet, eternal way to interlock and share the space. So distrust allocates are hollow mineral tubes formed by dripping water. These ancient cave formations begin as a single drop hangs from the ceiling, depositing a microscopic ring of calcite before falling. Over vast eons, these rings stack into a thin, fragile straw that grows downward in a silent, patient rhythm. Imagine a subterranean cathedral ceiling crowded with thousands of these delicate, white needles. Each one holds a single drop of water at its tip, gleaming like a bioluminescent jewel against the deep black void of the cave. The water flows through the invisible center of the tube, an eternal lifeline for the stone. The growth is slow and protected. It is a humbling reminder that great and enduring things often begin as fragile, hollow vessels built quietly, one drop at a time, through the patient repetition of a single, simple act. Permineralization transforms ancient organic wood into solid, eternal stone. This fast process occurs when a tree is buried under volcanic ash or sediment, protecting it from decay, while mineral-rich water silently saturates its cells. A silica patiently replaces the cell walls molecule by molecule, preserving the invisible structure of the wood in an eternal crystal embrace. Imagine a fallen log in a petrified forest, stripped of its bark. It looks like wood, but it rings like a bell when struck. The interior reveals rings of agate and jasper, glowing with bioluminescent reds and ochreous against the deep black of the fossilized bark. The tree has entered a quiet, subterranean immortality. It is a reminder that even when a living substance is gone, the form and history can endure, transformed by the vast and patient intake of the earth itself into something everlasting. Methane clathray tests from a crystalline cage of water molecules that traps individual gas molecules inside. This ancient structure, often called fire ice, exists only in the high pressure and low temperature of the subterranean ocean floor. The water molecules form a silent, rigid lattice, creating an invisible prison for the methane, holding it in a patient, eternal stasis. The structure is physically unstable at the surface, yearning for the weight of the deep. Imagine a chunk of white, ice-like solid brought up from the deep black abyss. It looks like ordinary packed snow, yet if lit, it burns with a ghostly, bioluminescent blue flame while dripping water. The gas is held in a vast molecular embrace, stable only in the cold, crushing dark. It creates a quiet, sleeping reservoir of energy. It is a humbling reminder that fire and ice can coexist in a stable, eternal union, provided the conditions are deep and quiet enough to hold the opposing forces in a balanced suspension. Stalactites are jagged, tooth-like seams that form within sedimentary rock due to pressure solution. This ancient process occurs when the vast weight of overlying rock forces the minerals to dissolve at the points of contact, creating an invisible interlocking boundary. The rock loses volume but gains a silent, complex suture line that looks like an electrocardiogram of the Earth's patient stress. The minerals mobilize and drift away, leaving insoluble clay to mark the boundary. Imagine looking at a polished slab of gray limestone. Running through it is a dark zigzag line, a subterranean scar where the stone has consumed itself to survive the pressure. The line stands out against the bioluminescent smoothness of the cut stone, a record of the eternal squeeze. The two sides embrace perfectly. It is a reminder that under immense pressure, we may lose parts of ourselves, but we gain a tighter, more vast and interlocking connection with our surroundings. Glacial erraticas are massive boulders left behind by retreating ice, oft unresting on completely different bedrock. These ancient travelers were plucked from their mountains and carried for hundreds of miles within the vast, slow flow of a glacier, following a silent, eternal path. When the ice finally melted, it gently lowered these giants onto the ground in a patient, final embrace, often in the middle of flat plains. Imagine a wide, flat green meadow or a deep black volcanic field where a single house-sized granite boulder stands alone. It glows with a pale bioluminescent lichen, an alien object in the landscape. It has ceased its drift and entered a quiet stasis, a monument to a vanished winter. It is a humbling reminder that we are often carried by invisible, vast forces beyond our control, and that there is dignity in standing firm and solitary wherever the ice eventually sets us down. A dull our sense is the billowy, floating light seen within moonstone, caused by light scattering between microscopic layers. This ancient optical effect arises from the intergrowth of two types of feldspar, orthoclase and albite, which separate into alternating, invisible lamella during cooling. The structure acts as a silent diffraction grating, creating a soft, blue glow that seems to drift deep within the gem. Picture a cabochon of moonstone held in the palm of your hand. It looks like a drop of subterranean water, capturing the bioluminescent light of the moon against the deep black of the night. The light is not on the surface, but held in the eternal, quiet embrace of the stone's heart. It moves as you move, a living thing. It is a reminder that true magic is not a flash on the exterior, but a vast, soft, and patient light that moves and breathes from within the depths of the soul. Calcite rafts are delicate, paper-thin sheets of crystal that form on the surface of still cave pools. These ancient formations occur when mineral-rich water is absolutely calm, allowing crystals to nucleate on the surface tension in a silent, patient mass. They float like ice, yet they are stone, drifting in a quiet, subterranean rhythm on the motionless water. The slightest disturbance sends them tumbling to the bottom to become a pile of debris. Imagine a vast dark lake deep underground and touched by wind. On the surface, thin plates of white stone float, resembling lily pads of ice. They are so fragile, yet in the eternal stillness, they thrive. They glow bioluminescent white against the deep black liquid, held only by the water's embrace. It is a humbling reminder that even the heaviest burdens can be borne lightly if the environment is calm enough, and that stone can learn to float if it respects the quiet tension of the surface. And so we drift to the end of our quiet journey through the intricate, vast kingdom of snowflakes and crystals. We have explored the perfect, ancient geometry born from simple water, seen the eternal commitment to the six-sided form, and felt the patient rhythm of atoms locking into place deep within the subterranean earth. This invisible order, this unwavering structural fidelity that underlies the entire material world is a profound and comforting truth. It is a reminder that beneath all surface chaos, there is an absolute, predictable safety and quiet harmony. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. There is nothing left to do now. Nothing to check, nothing to hold, and nowhere to be. Just breathe. Let the weight of your body sink deeply into your bed, surrendering to the vast stillness that surrounds you. Let your eyelids grow heavy, sealing out the day. Now, let the enduring, patient order of the snowflakes and crystals cradle your deepest dreams and hold them in perfect, eternal rest. Good night.